Find out how you can succeed at work after you survive the pandemic. Join us for the Marketplace Shift, WorkShift online conference. The ongoing global pandemic has brought the world as we know it to a standstill. Economies are ailing, governments are teetering, health services are stretched, and individuals are living in anxiety. Believe it or not, this too shall pass, but as we heard a senior UK government official say, it was easier to turn off the tap of the UK workplace than it will be to put it back on. To put perspective on this season, we need to apply the words in 1 Chronicles 12:32, which says, "The men of Issachar had an understanding of the times and knew what Israel ought to do." The question is, what will our work-life reality be post this global pandemic? Will jobs exist the way they were packaged pre-COVID-19? Will work patterns remain the same? Will lifestyle balance be affected? Will some of us really have the jobs to go back to? Will some industries that employ millions still be viable post the pandemic? With this in mind, we need to put on our spiritual and strategic thinking caps so that we are not caught off guard and that life does not just pass us by. WorkShift brings you commentary, advice and know-how from industry and field experts that will give you better perspective and a distinctive advantage in the marketplace as we approach the new norm. Keynote speakers are Lord Michael Hastings, Leke Alder, Tonye Cole, Balaji Balogun, and our host Dr. Shola Fola Alade. Other field experts will cover the following sectors: oil and gas, finance and banking, telecoms, industry, media, energy and technology. Don't miss WorkShift from Tuesday the 5th to Thursday the 7th of May 2020, exclusively on the Liberty Church London's YouTube channel. Toyosi Ogunsheye. Toyosi heads BBC's operations and 5 language services in Anglophone West Africa and Francophone Africa, with a team of over 200 journalists to deliver objective, trustworthy, creative and valuable journalism on the African continent. She is an internationally recognised journalist and experienced manager with over 15 years' experience in the media industry. She is the current Vice President, World Editors Forum, recipient of the Presidential Precinct Inaugural Young Leader Award, Knight International Journalism Award, and President Barack Obama's Young African Leaders Initiative Award. Her passion is exploring opportunities in media, technology, public policy, and international development. Toyosi has a PhD in Politics and International Relations from the University of Leicester. Welcome your conference speaker, Toyosi Ogunsheye.
Toyose Musheye. I'm the head of West Africa at the BBC. I look after the operations of the BBC in Anglophone West Africa and Francophone West Africa. And this involves all the language services in West Africa that include BBC Afrique, that's the BBC's French service in the whole of Francophone Africa, with DRC Congo being our biggest market. And of course Anglophone West Africa, where we have BBC Hausa, BBC Igbo, BBC Yoruba and BBC Pidgin, including deployment, co-productions with other partners. But basically, it's not just been the experience of the BBC, it's the experience of almost every digital or broadcast media platform in the world. It's been very exciting. Also has to see seeing how people are using media beyond the conventional means, and how the media can also go to the people rather than wait for the people to come to us. Bottom line is not so much an issue for us at the BBC. As I said, we are a public service. Our news is free. We do not charge on our news. So I can't speak for I can't speak about bottom line regarding the BBC. Our own bottom line is our audiences, and that's how we gauge performance as to how many people are coming to the BBC. And as I said earlier, we've seen a massive growth, unprecedented growth in the number of people looking for information. And I know that a lot of other media platforms who are also digital like the BBC but are advert or revenue driven have also made quite some money, because most of the time the more audiences are coming to you, the more money you're making on these platforms. So it's also been a story of success in terms of bottom line for digital platforms, because people are browsing on their phones, they're checking blogs, they're checking newspaper websites, they're checking Instagram, they're checking Facebook, they're on Twitter. Everybody is hungry for information. So the bottom line for the BBC in this crisis are audiences, and we are really excited that new people are coming to us daily, including young people and women. It's totally changed how we work. The BBC has always prided itself in being flexible when it comes to our journalism. But this health crisis has further made us more flexible. We've had to do remote working. We've had to broadcast from homes. We've had to do so many things we never thought we could ever do. And what's also done is it's taught a lot of people new skills. So we have journalists who would normally not film with their iPhones, film with their iPhones. So people are, and when I mean people, I mean our employees, have come to learn new skills, which we find very useful. Apart from learning new skills, it's also changed our working hours. Like, nothing is cast in stone anymore, because people are working from home. They understand that everybody's looking for information. And even though we have shift patterns, we have rotas, almost everybody is working round the clock because people want information. So that's sort of flattened the working hours and the working shifts that we operate within the BBC. Another effect it had on our employees is creativity. I mentioned a bit earlier. It's amazing how before we would go into offices to conduct interviews, we would go to meet people in different places to conduct interviews. But right now we're conducting interviews remotely via Skype, via Zoom, by Facebook video, by Instagram Live. The possibilities are endless. And personalities who would normally even say no to an interview, they have more time to do interviews now. And so it's also enriched our journalism. Our customers are audiences. And as I said earlier, I think more than ever before, people want information. And when we look at the trends within the BBC, when we look at our data and who is reading what and from where, it's very interesting, where you find that non-Nigerians are interested in what is happening in Nigeria, where you see a country like Madagascar, that the president said they found a cure. And when you look at the number of audiences or where they're coming from, they're not just people living in Madagascar. You have people from all over the world wanting to know what is the latest with the herbal cure in quote in Madagascar. So we've seen interesting trends, audiences. We used to think we knew audiences, but we're realizing that we didn't know our audiences because we've seen a different pattern in how they consume news. But it's also very interesting for us because it's giving us new insight into what we didn't know before. We're seeing that even when it comes to COVID consumption of news, it's very varied. You see young people want good news about COVID. You see them want to read more stories about innovations, which vaccine is where, what is it coming, which country is introducing what regulation. You see young people interested in things they can do at home. What is the future looking like for them post-COVID? So we've also seen an interesting pattern, even in COVID stories, because you could do one COVID story and then it tells us, oh, old people within this category are interested in this story. Young people want that story. And stories would normally think that old people will be interested in, you see young people reading it, and stories you think that young people will be interested in, you see old people reading. The same thing with women and how they consume news. It's changed drastically. People used to say, oh, women only want to read news that have to do with fashion, with maybe lifestyle, but COVID has changed all that. Whether male or female, we find that a consumption of news is not very gender specific anymore. And I think the question for us going forward will be, how do we keep these new audiences? How do we keep this interest? How do we keep, because we've seen very interesting trends that are very good for our business. And we want to see, how can we keep this trend going? How can we keep these audiences with us? We do not want COVID to go and then we see this dive. It's very important that it continue to see the BBC as the premium platform for their news. The BBC is a very safety-conscious organization, extremely so. And when the Nigerian government and other governments in West Africa issued directives, we simply obeyed. And what that meant was we had to cut down the number of people coming into the bureau. And if you've worked in the newsroom, it could be really impactful in the sense that a lot of the technology is built within the building. And I was telling somebody earlier that nobody knew that a day would come when we would need this technology outside the bureau, where everybody would need to work within the bureau. So you have a case where our software and every other thing we do is built to only work within a BBC office. And so the big question was, how do we adapt? And then remote working isn't as easy as people think, because you have to think about electricity. Not everybody has constant electricity. Not everybody has the resources to maintain constant electricity. We also have the issue of Wi-Fi and internet connectivity. There are days when it will work, there are days when it would not work. There's also a cost for that. There's also a case of how convenient is it for people to gather information in their homes, where you need perfect silence sometimes to do packages, whether for radio, whether for TV or for digital. You can't afford too much interference. And so these are the issues that we had to grapple with dealing with working remotely. But we came up with a solution where we had to keep extremely essential staff in the office. And what do we mean extremely essential? It has nothing to do with their skills, because every skill within the BBC is essential. What we simply did was, everybody who cannot work without using a core BBC software has to come to work. And then we organized a really safe environment very close to the office, and then we bring this staff to the office on a daily basis and return them. Of course, that came with a cost on its own, because you'd have to pay for accommodation, filling of staff, safety, security, buying fuel in the car during the period. So these are some of the things we've had to grapple with. But we strongly believe that there's no price that is too high to pay for the safety of our staff, particularly when the staff are critical to our output that millions of people all over the world are relying on. So those are some of the things we've had to do to manage remote working here, not just in Nigeria, but all over West Africa and even beyond West Africa. We've also had to invest a lot in masks, ensuring our staff are washing their hands, sanitizers, checking on people to be sure they're fine. Do we need to isolate? Constant communication with staff. Because the fact that people are working remotely does not mean everything is fine. The fact that they're in their homes does not mean they don't have anxiety, that they don't have fears about the future. And so there's also been the emotional side of managing people's expectations, their fears and frustrations about the new world we live in. So we've also had to do a lot of that. And I think what it's thrown up is there's no one way of doing anything. There's so many ways of doing the same thing, and the possibilities are endless. And there's also the point of accountability. If people are working from home, how do you ensure that they're accountable? How do you ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, even though you can't see them? And it's about setting daily targets and daily briefs as to who is supposed to do what are you supposed to deliver to the office, with line managers check in regularly to be sure everything is fine. It's not been the same. It's not been the same. But what we've also done is find creative ways around this. We can no longer deploy. So when I say deployment, I mean would normally go out to do interviews, do investigations, do human interest stories, do lives with people. We can't do that anymore because of safety. And so the question is, if you can't go out to interview people, if you can't go out to do news reports and investigations, what are you left with as an organization? What do your employees do? Because that's what they've been trained with all their lives to do. Now that they can't do this, what are they left to do? And so we've had to innovate, as I said earlier, doing loads of those interviews we would have done face-to-face. We now do them by Skype. We do lots of them by Facebook Live. We do lots of Instagram Lives. We're doing lots of user-generated content, telling our readers to send us information, pictures, videos. So every day we are brainstorming, we're saying, we can't go out today. How can we be creative? And we found a lot of opportunity in this crisis. I'd like to focus on the positive first. How will our organizations, how will the BBC's operation and other media platforms, how will their operations change after this pandemic? I think we're going to keep a lot of the creative things we've done. We're going to keep, we can't come this far. We can't come up with all this new innovation. We can't come up with all this new creativity and then throw it away. We'll have to continue to use them after this crisis. And I think that's one of the things we're going to see change, where we're definitely not going to go back to how we used to work before. That was in the past. We're just going to continue to do what we used to do. As I said, the BBC is a public service organization. What we're going to see more is more flexible working hours. We're going to see more flexible working hours. We're going to see more people opt to work part-time. That's going to happen. We may even also see a change of roles. One of the things that is also possible is jobs would no longer be location specific. Because what COVID has shown is you can sit in America and work in Nigeria. You can sit in Nigeria and work in the UK. So I think after COVID, a lot of jobs that were location specific are going to change. And I think that's an opportunity for people who want to work in countries where they've never been to look at what roles are available and what they can do. So we're going to see loads of that happen. Outside the BBC, I know the print media is adversely affected, and there's going to be loads of job cuts if we don't exit this crisis very easily. And the question will be, what's going to happen to thousands, if not millions of journalists, particularly in the print sector, who've lost their jobs? And I think for me, the answer to that would be for them to find opportunities in other sectors, or for them to start their own media platforms. It could even be a blog. It could be a blog. It could be even an opportunity for partnerships where journalists can come together to say, you know what, we want to have a group of investigative journalists. We're going to look for funding, and we're just going to publish our findings on the internet. What I like to say in when things like this happen, and I know it's easy to say, is there's always an opportunity in a crisis. And so maybe what this crisis is going to birth for the media, not just print media, whether it's digital, broadcast, TV or radio, whichever, is the opportunity for media organizations to come together, put their resources together, not just the people that have lost their jobs, but what this has shown us is that there's so much opportunity in togetherness, and that's likely what we're going to see after this crisis. More mergers, more acquisitions, more freelance journalists, and more individual journalists coming together to start their own thing. How can we remain profitable post-COVID-19? It's either we innovate or die. And that is what COVID is showing all of us. If we do not innovate, there is no way forward. And the only way to survive post-COVID is to continue to do what we're doing during COVID. Because there's a temptation for us to go back to the past and think, oh, COVID is over, let me go. But consumer behavior changes rapidly. And it's amazing how everybody is getting used to how they're consuming products, they're consuming services, they're consuming the media in this new era. So it will be suicidal, in quote, for business owners, whether print or otherwise, to want to go back to how life was pre-COVID. We'd have to keep all the new creativity we've come up with. We'd have to keep all the new innovations we've come up with. And we'd have to think, what are the opportunities where are the opportunities in everything we've done during COVID? I'll give you a really good example. One of the things we didn't really used to do a lot of before, across not just the BBC, across the platforms, was where we'll do Facebook Lives with stakeholders or newsmakers. We'll do them maybe once in a while, but we realize, you know what? Audiences really like to engage with them live. Audiences really like to hear these people talk to them and for them to also ask them their questions. So if you were a profitable or a profit-oriented news organization, what you want to look at is, if Facebook Lives are really popular with your audiences, do you want to build an advertisement into that? I know Facebook is very restrictive when it comes to advertisement, but even if you can't do that on Facebook, how else can you continue to bring live programs to your platforms, and how can you build revenue into that? I think post-COVID, people, particularly for the print media, our audiences will not be interested in what happened yesterday or what happened this morning, because COVID has changed their taste. They're now used to what is happening now and what is going to happen tomorrow. And if we do not keep up with that pace, we're not likely to survive it. I really like this question about how can employees remain employable. I was talking to someone the other day and I said that it's very important that we do not see this period as a relaxing period, like this is a time for me to just chill, this is a mini vacation or even a full vacation. It's time for me to just sleep, all the sleep I've not slept, this is the time for me to sleep. The challenge with that is, if you do not prove your value, or if you do not have value during this COVID era, I doubt very much if we're going to have value after the COVID era. And that's the challenge. So how can we remain employable? It's about asking ourselves value. What value am I adding? What value can I add in the future? And one of the ways to identify this value is by talking to our stakeholders. When I mean stakeholders, maybe your line manager, your customers. How can I add value to you? Because sometimes our definition of value is very different from the definition of value of our employers, very different from the definition of value from our consumers. So it's very important that whatever we think is value added for us is in tandem with what our stakeholders think is value added for them. And so once you identify what that value is, the next thing is, how can I implement this value? Now, do not think that because we've been at home for a month or more and nobody is calling you from the office and everything is fine. No, everything is not fine. In fact, if you've not heard from your line manager in the past few weeks, then there should be a problem somewhere. If there's just been silence from your office and you think, oh, we're just on holiday and we'll be right back. It's not going to happen that way. Because if your employer did not find good use of you during this crisis, he's going to be asking himself, or she's going to be asking herself, why do I really need to keep this person? My business has gone on with or without this person, so what do I need them for? And a lot of us may think it's too late, but I do not think so. I think there's still a window for us to ask the question of value. What can I do differently? How can I make myself a valuable member of my team? How can I connect with the people I serve in a very different way? And COVID or no COVID, that's a question we should be asking if we want to remain indispensable. People often say nobody is indispensable. Maybe, but I know that organizations never forget people who were useful, who were creative, who were valuable, who saw opportunity in a moment of crisis. And the question is, are we finding, or are we in tandem with the opportunities that our organizations have discovered in this crisis? Because if there's an opportunity in this crisis, the question should be, how am I playing a role in this opportunity? What am I doing with this opportunity? How can I lead in this opportunity? How can I support in this opportunity? Because if we're not asking ourselves those questions, there's likely to be a crisis after COVID-19. Post-COVID-19, of course, the media that I represent will continue to thrive because people love to consume news in whatever format or style. I think it will continue to thrive. The only thing is we'll have to look for more innovative ways to reach our audiences and keep them with us. Of course, the food industry. People will continue to eat. It's about looking at how we can be also innovative with food. Logistics are also huge during this crisis. Health, of course, it's major. Another thing it's not gonna end is agriculture, very linked to food, because people need food, and not just agriculture in terms of planting food. It's also how can we, if you can't get involved as a farmer, how can you get the produce across to people? That's such a blooming business in Africa at the moment. People delivering farm produce to families who are too busy to go out during this crisis. Another thing that is thriving is clothing. People are becoming more innovative with how they're dressing within this season. It's going to continue after COVID because people want to continue to remain careful. So we want to look at the clothing industry, which I think will continue to thrive. Of course, the telecoms. People are talking more than ever before because we can't go out to meet people. So we want to check on them. We want to see how they're doing software engineering. Everybody knows how big Zoom is doing at the moment and how other big players are trying to get into the Zoom share. So software development, software engineering, IT is one of the big industries that will thrive in the future. What other advice do I have? It would be to, number one, be grateful that we're here. I know there's so much pressure on all of us as to what are we coming out in this season. But the fact that we're alive and we survived this and we're surviving this, there's something to be grateful for. And so that's the first realization, that I'm here in this era, seeing this happen and escape it by God's grace is huge. The other advice I would say is for us to also be pragmatic. We live in a society where expectations are very high. And we need to be pragmatic as to what can we really do. So on the one hand, we're saying that innovate or die. But on the other hand, I'm saying, you know what? Things are really hard now. Things are really hard. And it's okay to be pragmatic without being lazy, without being laid back. The third thing would be, we need to be innovative. I mean, that's so clear. That is so clear. We need to be innovative. The world is moving very fast. Things are changing rapidly. In the next 24 hours, we don't even know what this world is going to look like. And so thinking one step ahead is very critical. Asking ourselves, what is going to happen? What is going to happen in the next 24 hours? And how do we know what's going to happen? Talking to the people that should know. This is not the time when we should sit down in our homes, keeping to ourselves. Yes, there's social distancing, but this is the time to talk to your friends, family members in different industries, asking them, what do you think the future is going to look like? Another advice I'd like to give is, this is the moment for partnerships. There's so much growth happening. There's so much synergy happening. And so, who are the people we can partner with? Sometimes you have a dream and you can't achieve that dream alone. You need other people with you. But if you're not talking to people, how would you know? So we also need to consider partnerships in this season. I have this dream. Who are the other people that have this similar dream with me? How can we come together in the most ethical way, in the most professional way that brings minimum hurt or minimum damage? How can we grow a partnership to meet the needs of people? So basically that's it. And for me, it would just be putting God first. Nobody knows tomorrow, but we know the one that holds tomorrow. And so when we use those tips and then we're holding God very close, then we will not just survive this crisis, we'll definitely thrive.
Man says there is a casting down. Our God says there is a lifting up, even in this pandemic. Our portion is to emerge this year, but to do so, we need to establish victory over many battles. And in our season of victory, we'll be equipped with strategies that will see that we emerge victorious. You really can't afford to miss any episode of the 5-part series Strategies for Supernatural Victory, as our lead pastors Dr. Shola and Pastor Bimbo Fala Alade take us on a journey to ultimate victory. As a further antidote to the global pandemic, we bring you the Marketplace Shift conference ably hosted by Dr. Shola Fala Alade with the faculty of industry leaders and field experts to address the new norm in the workplace post-COVID-19. Our international second quarter 7 days of breakthrough is themed Anointing for Supernatural Victory, and it runs from the 9th to the 15th of May and culminates with our first ever Global Breakthrough Night, hosted by our visionary pastor, Dr. Shola Fala Alade. Super Evenings return in earnest as Dr. Shola Fala Alade continues in the Priesthood series with The Priesthood Advantage on Fridays 8th, 22nd and 29th of May. Vibe continue in their Storm series with Friday sessions at 7 p.m. on the 1st and 8th of May. The Liberty Kids Annual Conference, Future Me, holds online at 5 p.m. on Sunday 17th of May 2020. Get your kids dressed in their aspirational roles as they join the must-attend interactive conference. Liberty Tribe, our teenage ministry, have their worship lounge on May the 2nd from 6 to 9 p.m. Don't miss it. Enrich, the marriage and parenting ministry, rounds up its premarital preparation course this month and hosts the first ever online marriage course, a 7-week course designed for married couples to invest in their relationship and build a strong marriage. Next steps at the Liberty Church. Connect 1, the first phase of our membership class, takes place on Sunday the 3rd of May, whilst our first Serve team member training is at 3 p.m. on the 9th of May. To develop your growth and maturity in Christ, this month register for Master Life, which runs in small groups every Sunday at 9 a.m. There are several prayer initiatives running online at the Liberty Church. From the inception of the lockdown, our lead pastors have led prayers on Instagram and Facebook at 7 p.m. daily, and this continues in May. Our corporate online daily prayer sessions held at 6 a.m. Monday to Friday and 8 a.m. on Saturdays and bank holidays. Liberty Ladies run the Esther prayer meeting on Periscope. To join, search for Prayer at Esther's Company. Prisoners Prayer Day online is at 1 p.m. on Sunday the 10th of May. Finally, Vibe are in a 40-day season of prayer and fasting, where they have prayer watches every hour of the day. If you're a young adult, do check the Vibe socials for further information. Remain on or join the Liberty Train this month and thank us later. Tolu Adeshina. Tolu is an executive director in one of the largest investment banks in the world. She started her career working in various roles within financial services, including IT consultancy, project and program management, execution and settlement services, and digital finance strategy. Over the lifespan of her career, she has worked with reputable companies such as Nasdaq, Deutsche Bank, and Barclays. She is an author and an avid volunteer, which led to her co-founding the Women's of the Word and Seed Foundation, and enjoys traveling. She has visited 5 continents with aspirations of visiting the last 2 in her lifetime. Her passions span from spending quality time with family and friends to exploring and trying out new cuisine. Welcome your keynote speaker, Tolu Adeshina.
Hello everyone. I would firstly like to start off by just thanking the Liberty Church London, particularly Dr. Shola Folalade and Pastor Bimbo Folalade for giving me this opportunity to speak on this platform. It's not one I take lightly at all, and in fact I'm just immensely grateful for the trust and the opportunity. So thank you so very much. Just to start off with, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Tolu Adeshino. I'm an executive director at an investment firm here in the United States. I work particularly in strategy and implementation, and my role is around understanding business opportunities, making realistic recommendations, and facilitating the successful implementation of the solutions provided. My career actually started in the UK. Fresh out of university, I went on to work for a private bank in the UK called Coutts Bank. And over the span of my career, I have been focused on the financial services sector with a lean towards technology. I've worked for a lot of familiar names, from Deutsche Bank to Royal Bank of Scotland to Barclays Wealth, NASDAQ, and I currently work for Goldman Sachs. I'm extremely excited to share some observations with you as we look into the effects of COVID-19, particularly around how we can position ourselves to maximize the opportunities that are bound to come in this season. They're just going to be small but practical tips that I'm going to be sharing, so I'm just going to dive right in. I know that everywhere around us right now, there have been a lot of comparisons being drawn between the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think the reason why is because both crises brought a lot of anxiety and financial instability. But the uniqueness of the COVID-19 pandemic is it's unprecedented in its scope and its reach and its scale. From individuals to institutions to governments, we're all still struggling to rebound and react to a fast-moving and ever-changing environment. Of course, following the 2008 crisis, one of the key things that was a result of that was increased oversight through the use of regulation and compliance requirements governing the way we do business. Companies became smarter, more transparent, more resilient, and kept, a larger reserve, ensuring that they were set up to be able to handle a lot of the systemic shocks that's going to happen as a result of a crisis. What COVID-19 has done, however, is completely thrown all of that out the window, because no contingency plan could bake in widespread quarantines or indefinite school closures or travel bans, and all of this as a result of a global health crisis. And the impact of the pandemic is being felt by everyone, despite different firms' financial health status, different individuals. It doesn't matter. Everybody's feeling the effects. That's where we're all starting from. And that level of uncertainty comes with its severe market reactions, as we've noticed and witnessed over the last few weeks to months. In the US alone, by mid-April, in a 4-week window, there were more unemployment claims filed than there were jobs created following the 2008 financial crisis. That means that in a space of 4 weeks, the entire gains of over a decade were completely wiped out. 30 million Americans have since filed for unemployment. That means in a 6-week window, there have been 30 million Americans that have been looking for jobs. That is an insane number. Morgan Stanley actually forecasted that the unemployment rate by the end of May will be looking at 16.4%. That's the highest since the Great Depression. So these times really are unprecedented times. And these are the facts of the times that people are working with. So it's no surprise that people's feelings of anxiety and instability and insecurity and just feeling out of control is rooted in a lot of these facts. Add to that the fact that the current challenges that firms are facing include finding a new way of working and engaging their workforce. Some are simply unable to accommodate any alternatives. In the US alone, 70% of workforce are unable to do their jobs from home. It is no surprise then to hear of just general decrease in business activity, which is leading to, a depression of banking profits and obviously a sharp decline in firm stock prices. All of these things are things that we all know. These are just facts that I'm reading off, but these are things that we all know, we've all experienced in the last few weeks. For the financial services industry in particular, on-location activities are very key to a lot of roles that we have to deal with. So things like traders needing robust real-time communications, or sales teams being subject to specific compliance monitoring. All of those things normally happen on location within an office, for example. But what COVID-19 has done is completely wiped that out, and the challenges to ensure that firms can cope with that change has not been tested at any scale until now. So those challenges are ranging from, being able to provide hardware to essential workers that need to work from home, to relaxing policies that would allow traders, for example, to trade away from the office for an indefinite amount of time, all the way through to figuring out how to accommodate a likely change in the demand for financial products out in the market. Of course, cybersecurity is top of mind for every firm. I was going to say most firms, but actually it's every firm. Significantly now, more than ever, a huge amount of people are working remotely with access to data and core systems. Highly sensitive financial information and strategies are being shared via unregulated third-party platforms. So it's no surprise when I say that looking at firms across the industry, specifically where I'm at, everyone is concerned about digital platform technology solutions to minimize impact and, increase growth in some way. And that is no surprise that anyone who is not invested in their technology solutions right now are bound to be the ones that are the worst hit from this crisis. So a lot of risk in the air. If you turn on the news, you'd hear about a lot of some of these things, from hacks happening to people joining meetings uninvited, etc. This is truly crazy times. And of course, it means that clients are feeling the impact too. They're looking to these organizations, to these financial services firms, to see which one of them is looking more financially stable, more financially strong than the other, because that's where they're really going to put their trust. They're becoming increasingly risk adverse. With a lot of the activity that we're seeing play out right now, especially with the market volatility, it's no surprise that depending on how long or how the situation evolves, cash flow is bound to become a problem, both for banks and their clients. And the industry is also dealing with the lowest levels of interest incomes that they have seen in recent times, as well as a lot more margin pressure. So all of these things add considerable concern to even the best prepared of firms. And some leaders are actually anticipating that the US GDP is going to drop by 40% this quarter, and likely not to improve to pre-crisis levels till Q1 2023. That is a long and considerable amount of time to be uncertain. What is, however, clear is that no one can avoid some impact here. Businesses are making clear that they are recognizing that their response in this time is going to be critical to their future business, customer and employee relationships, and it could further damage or greatly damage their public image. So for a lot of people who are, able to work from home, can keep working during these times, apart from having to work, despite school closures, it's meant that there's a new normal that people are having to deal with. On a lot of my meetings now, I'm introduced to a lot of little humans, aka children, or fairy friends, as I call them, aka pets. So a lot of our Zoom calls become very interesting because, people are dealing with life. They're dealing with relatives that are sick, that require dependents that are there that they cannot shake, and everyone's at home. So, using all these digital platforms for things like entertainment, getting fit, homeschooling, working, meetings, and everything in between. And that's going to continue for the long term. This is our new normal. Our new normal is, it brings the world closer together, yes, but our new normal is interacting with clients and colleagues globally via video conferencing and all these digital platforms as a way of engaging and working collaboratively. And obviously it has its pros and it has its cons. People are dealing with a lot of pressure in their lives, and all of those things are bound to affect productivity. And so right now, what I'm finding or what I'm noticing as I speak to leaders across the industry, friends across different firms, is that what is key is firms are having to be a lot more flexible and obviously pivot and reprioritize their deliverables and their goals for the year, because they have to be understanding that not only is productivity going to drop as they look to reduce costs and save money and budgets are being cut, they have to make some sacrifices and some changes while focusing their attention on their people. So they're having to build flexibility into their working practices. Some firms are going as far as to offer COVID days, time outside of your annual leave, just to allow people the time to deal with the issues that they are having to deal with, real life circumstances that are coming up for them, besides just having to deal with childcare. The people that are dealing with real issues. And the workforce itself is changing. Employees are changing by the pandemic. Flexible working aside, even the need for large physical offices are being questioned. So essential workers that have to go in, how safe are these buildings are questions that they're asking their employers. Can you provide health services on site? Can you provide me with extended childcare? Because if I have to go into the office without having any of those things done, I can't concentrate on my role. I can't concentrate on the work that you're asking me to do. I can't adequately service my clients. So those things are coming up, and they're real concerns, not just for the employees, but also for the firms. But despite all of this and much more that I haven't even touched on, there are numerous opportunities that are also coming up in this space and in this time. Believe it or not, I actually think it's a matter of perspective. Dealing with a lot of executive and talking with a lot of C-suite leaders, I'm always amazed when I hear people talk about the fact that we have to reduce costs, we have to cut budgets, and we have to, take away the focus from contractors maybe or consultant firms and focus it more on full-time employees. And that is actually a good thing for the full-time employees. That's areas where there would now be gaps for the short term, but people can step in and take on leadership roles. People can step in and take on stretch assignments. People can step in and volunteer to lead teams, things that they might not have had the opportunity to do pre-COVID, because we had, other people in the role. People are moving on. People are finding jobs in these times. And so despite the fact that so many people have fallen into despair, not by choice, of course, but because of the circumstances around us, there are also people that are not panicking, but they are rethinking their strategies. They're putting their hands up for things that were not typically in their sphere, and obviously stepping into new opportunities and stepping into new roles and stepping into new responsibilities in this time. Whenever I hear, and it's prevalent right now, even in almost all meetings that I'm privy to, I hear concerns from people, real concerns around what it means to reduce costs, because that normally translates to letting people go, and it normally translates to hoarding cash within firms. It's not hard to see why people would completely discount what I'm saying about the possibility of opportunities being there in this time. But one thing that has come up time and time again is that businesses that will succeed and thrive in this time would have to focus on what their consumers want. Right? What do their consumers want? And what we're finding, the same way we as employees, or we as entrepreneurs, or we as consumers are looking for digital platforms, mobile solutions to be able to engage with our loved ones, with our service providers, etc., is the same way firms are having to recognize that the future now, the new normal now, is that most people are going to stay engaging through digital platforms. The need for face-to-face is going to be significantly reduced, at least in the short term. So if you're not leveraging technological solutions to engage with your clients, to engage with your workforce, you are not going to be able to succeed in this time. It's been outside of financial services industry. You can see how companies are being affected. For example, I was reading about how Amazon has made 24 billion in this time, while a company like Primark, which has no online presence, has gone from making something like 600 million, I think a month or a week or something like that, to making zero, because they had to close their doors. And so they have no online presence. People first of all, people are not buying as much, but people still doing some level of shopping, right? So being able to provide to your customers' needs is something that is very prevalent, and using technology to do so is now more than ever something that's a critical, essential part of any business. And everywhere I turn, every every division I speak to, every team I speak to, the focus on digital solutions is prevalent. Digital platforms is prevalent. Even in my role, my focus this year remains and always will remain mobile solutions, digital platforms. How do you provide financial products via your platforms? Firms all over the world are prioritizing the deliverables, as I mentioned. So where the opportunities really lie is on where are they focused on now, and ensuring that you're building the skills to get into that part, into that time. Because where they're cutting the budgets is things that are not enabling those services that allow them to further service their clients. So to minimize you being the person that isn't up for that promotion or even being hired would mean that you have to, in this time, be smart about the skills that you're building, be smart about the roles that you're putting yourself up, be smart about the opportunities that you're taking advantage of in this time. And I want to actually mention the fact that firms in this time, despite everything that's happening, firms are hiring, firms are promoting. I know that was a shock to me. I don't know how about anyone else, but I remember when this whole thing started, one of the key meetings that I sat in was about how we were, freezing all hiring, even the things that were people that were in the works. Hiring was being frozen, budgets were being taken away, where previously you might have had a budget approved for a certain amount of headcount. Those things were going away, to now where we're actually employing people internally and externally, because we realize that in this season, as certain things become redundant, certain types of roles become redundant, other roles are becoming essential and require people to fill those roles. So even in a pandemic, especially if you're a job seeker still trying to make progress in your search, or if you've just been laid off, I still want to strongly emphasize the fact that a lot of companies are still hiring. Don't panic, don't despair, don't fall into a worry hole. At this moment, lift up your head, look around, go and dust off your LinkedIn profile. Pretend it's a dating profile, learn how to sell yourself, pick up the phone and look up hiring managers, call them, send an email, and then follow up with a phone call. At this time, more than ever, proactivity, creativity in the way we approach things is more than needed. Like I mentioned, it was a surprise to me to hear that firms were still hiring. And I actually did a quick Google search, just to see what kind of firms were hiring, and I came across jobs from Deutsche Bank, Charles Schwab, Broadridge, Prudential. All of these firms are hiring, and I was like, okay, we're talking about a high number of unemployment. I'm not taking away from that, but in this time, more than ever, there are essential roles that need to be filled, and it's all about what skills are you looking to build so that you can ensure that you walk straight into your next role prepared and ready to take it on. I was really curious to hear about a friend of mine who has recently just got his dream job in this corona times, and what really surprised me was the fact that he even put himself forward at this time to be looking for a new job when he is in a seat that's very comfortable in his current company. And he mentioned that he looked around him and he saw a lot of opportunity for him to step into roles in firms, maybe not as developed as a firm that he's coming from, but for him to step into leadership roles in those firms and take what he has learned pre-COVID days and go and implement it in these firms that are drowning, that are in need. So they are opening up roles because they need people to come from those established firms and help them build and help them recognize what direction they should be taking. I just found it really fascinating, and it really changed my perspective, and that's why I mentioned that I think it's a matter of perspective. I could have stayed where I was actually one of the worry-whats that was worrying about what it meant for me, what it meant for my career, what it meant for my year, to moving to thinking, okay, actually in this time, how can I put myself forward to show that I have leadership material? How do I put myself forward to ease the burden on my superiors and let them know that I am someone of value to them, so that I do not find my name on any list that I don't want it to be on? I will say that supply at this moment does far exceed demand, but that does not mean that there's no hope. That does not mean that people are not, going to hire or take people on, etc. At this time, it is time for people to truly put themselves out there and truly not despair, and actually look to take advantage of opportunities. Like I mentioned at the start, all I intend to do is give small tips, things that we might already know, but things that we need to not forget to particularly put into action in this time. So rather than panicking in this time, we need to rethink our strategy. What would have worked pre-COVID is no longer applicable in this time. Now we have to be strategic. We have to go online, like I said, and build out our LinkedIn profile. Like, we have to be willing to make ourselves uncomfortable and call people, connect with connections of connections, right? Don't be shy to ask for a recommendation, to call someone up and say, oh, I see that you have your first or second connection on LinkedIn is this person. I'm trying to get access to that person or someone in that firm. Can you please connect me with that person? You can't be shy. You can't just put your CV out there. You need to be proactively selling yourself, proactively working your connections. We always say your network is your net worth. Now is the time to really call that into play. Now is the time to build your network, but it's also the time for you to leverage your networks. Reach out and start building a network with the people that you want. And for those that are fortunate enough to already be in roles that you're trying to hold on to, you're trying to succeed in and thrive in despite the current time, I will say that now is the time for you to demonstrate value. As I've already mentioned, companies are reducing costs left, right, and center. And actually that makes opportunity for full-time staff, right? There are a lot of gaps, a lot of places that companies are going leaner. So people are having to do a lot more. What you cannot do is coast. What you cannot do is just your day job. What you have to be showing is that you are someone that can provide solutions to everyday problems. Things as simple as helping your team figure out the return to the office plan, or facilitating COVID calls, or even coordinating the spring or summer interns in your company if you guys have any, deciding what they do, what they present at this time, will set you apart from the rest of your team. It will mean that you're the kind of person that your leaders will go to and say, hey, how is this person doing? And before you know it, you have access to positions of power that your other teammates would not have, and you're getting more opportunities. You're getting opportunities to network with people that you would not have, and meet and work with people that you might not previously have done. So it's really important that creativity and innovation are things that you bring to your everyday work in this time. It's not good enough to just do what you've always been doing. You have to build networks. Demonstrating value is something that sounds really basic, but it's key to do every single day. Position yourself to be visible, and be creative in your execution of things. Those are key things to positioning yourself to get and maximize opportunities in this time. And when I talk about demonstrating value, people always think, what does that mean? So I've come to really appreciate what it means for a company to have a posting culture. That means, at the beginning of the week, you pick up the phone or you send your boss an email and say, these are the 5 key things that I'm going to be looking at this week. Let me know if there's anything in additional that you want me to be looking at. What you're doing there is getting on their radar, number 1. Number 2, getting them to agree with you what the priorities are. The worst thing is to go through your entire week working extremely hard only to find that your boss doesn't care about what you delivered this week, because the things that his superiors are looking to him for was on a completely different track. As opposed to you being that person that your boss can lean on and say, hey, I've been asked to do XYZ. Can you go gather that information for me? Because as you ease their pain points, then they're going to be hopefully working for you as well. And that's how you get mentors. That's how you get sponsors. It's putting your hands up and saying, hey, how can I help? I'm available to you. And I know that right now it's very tough for people all around to take on more description. You get a job description, totally additional. You are the program lead for XYZ, and these are your job responsibilities. And you go and you execute that. You go over and beyond, and you try and demonstrate that you are a leader in your field. In the States, you have a job description, but no one follows it. And that was something that really shocked me. And I don't know if that's just our industry. I don't know if that's just my company, but nobody follows it. In fact, when I got here, the first thing people said to me is, what do you want your role to be? You define your role. I was confused. What does that mean? How do you define your role? But I have found since I have been here that that has been the best thing that this environment creates for me. I have been able to go in and say, you know what, I would like to develop myself in this way and actually look for the opportunities. Go actively look for the opportunities to do so. Sometimes that involves me doing stuff that other people are like, that's not your remit. But because I know where I want to get to and what I want, I'm like, no, I'm happy to do this particular task because that task is one step towards me getting into a place that allows me to move to the next level that I want to be in. And that's what I want to leave with. That's another small tip I would say is don't wait for anyone to tell you what your job is. You have all the flexibility right now while you're sitting in your house to learn new skills, to go on and find courses for free, because a lot of companies are actually offering this at the moment for free because everyone is home and they're looking at ways to maximize, you know, their visibility, you know. So you go and log into one of those courses. I'm happy to recommend a few in the chat, but like, you know, go ahead, log into those courses, sign up to things that you want to do, and then go in and implement it in the environment that you are in. You know, when I made the suggestion earlier about things like putting your hand up to plan what your interns will be doing, some people will look at it and be like, that's not my role and that's already set. You'd be surprised how that can be your way of showcasing that you are someone that should be a leader. And as those interns are presenting to senior stakeholders who care about the things that they are doing, you are there in the room to talk about why you gave them the projects that you gave them and how you're thinking strategically in terms of how that would fit in with the overall business model and how you'd like to see them come back or how they've been performing alongside that. It makes the leaders look at you in a different way, that you're not just a regular Joe or a regular Jane or regular person on the team, but you're somebody that's thinking beyond, of over and beyond. And don't be afraid to say what you want, to say, you know, I'm interested in this particular type of thing, and that's why I have done XYZ to get there. And always, always, always document your achievements. As you're doing some of these things, no matter how small, make sure that you have a little book to the side that you're writing them in. As we are going through this COVID pandemic, it hasn't stopped firms from doing mid-year reviews. So despite everything that's going on, despite how crazy the world is, despite the fact that everything is upside down, you still need to be able to go into a room, virtually of course, and justify why you have the job that you have and why you should be promoted or why you should be given, you know, some kind of recompense at the end of the year. So if you don't have all of those things written down and all you've done is just lament and panicked and worried for the last 3 months, you have wasted an opportunity for you to go into a room with your superiors virtually once again and tell them and impress them and let them know things that they would have forgotten because of everything that's been happening, and say, I did this, I did this, I did this, I was able to showcase this, I was able to help in the team in this way. And they would have no reason, because they have evidence in front of them, to do anything but keep you, because you demonstrated your value, and in some cases even promote you. So those are the things that I'm talking about when I talk about getting opportunities in this time, or maximizing opportunities in this time. Because despite all the gloom and the woes and the things that I'm hearing in the news, what's actually abundantly clear is that there's more than enough work still to go around. You know, companies haven't completely shut down just yet. Yes, they are reducing costs. Yes, supply is exceeding demand, but there are some essential things that companies are needing in this time and will keep needing in this time. For some, it's a time to leave that job that you hate and go start something creative that would leverage the captive audiences that you have on social media platforms right now, for example. For others, it's a time to prove your value. It's a time to prove your worth. It's a time to connect with mentors, find sponsors within your organization. You cannot neglect those relationships in this time. This is a time to, you no longer have the opportunity to go knock on a door and pop your head through a door. Now you can actually put in a Zoom call, a 15-minute Zoom call, just to check in and to say, hey, I'm just wanted to engage with you. It takes nothing to put a quick phone call in or a quick video call in. Ask how you can be of help in this time. Ask what areas you can assist in, even things outside of your remit, you know, and just focus on that and make sure you post up to say, this is what I've done, this is how I've made an impact. And I will repeat for emphasis here, you cannot just do your day job in this time. Despite everything else that's going on in your life, you cannot just do your day job. So you must choose which areas you want to focus on. How do you want to maximize your day? Make sure that you're solving problems, no matter how small. You know, on video meetings, speak up. If that's all you do this entire week, you have already won. Make sure you're proactive and making time for others. Volunteer to engage with junior staff. You know, put yourself on COVID business continuity planning teams. Things like that really, really make a difference. I'm re-emphasizing it because those are things that nobody really talks to you about, but they're very, very key at the moment. And do not forget to be visible. Check in with your team, check in with your superiors, agree your priorities, be visible. The way a lot of people are visible right now on Instagram, TikTok, and etc., be visible in your firm, right? Leverage those technical solutions that are available to you to stay visible, to be proactive. You do not and cannot afford to be in the shadows. And finally, get to know your team. Okay, it's not just all about looking upwards. Sometimes it's looking sideways and looking down. Those things make a huge difference in separating you out from the next one. And people are how you're going to get those opportunities. And sometimes it's because somebody, Susan next to you that you checked in on, her brother's company is currently recruiting, and it just might happen to be that thing that you've been wanting to do for a long time. Or, you know, it could be Heather up in HR that you just checked in just to make sure she was fine because you had heard that her mother was a little bit unwell, and because you stayed in contact, she's now thinking of you and she's giving you some gems as and when things are coming up to say, hey, did you know that, you know, this particular area of the business is looking at XYZ? I heard that that's in line with your skill set. Is that something you could help with, or is that something you could partner with that leader to help us get done? Things like that are how opportunities really surface. Those are how opportunities really become real and tangible things in people's lives. So they are very small tips. I'm hoping they're very practical tips, but genuinely defining your role in this time is key, whether you're in the United States or not. I have found this to be a valuable thing that I am learning. I'm still learning it, but it's something that is really transforming my working life. It's transforming my career. It has opened doors for me that I did not think I would have a year ago. I am sitting in rooms that I didn't even know existed a year ago, simply because I made a decision to define what my role was. I decided I no longer wanted to be in a particular box, and I wanted to think outside of that box. And all I did is I started small. I started with some of the tips and tricks that I'm telling you. I put my hand up for things. I was willing to stretch myself. I was willing to put myself up for things that seemed beneath me, seemed beneath my skill level, seemed beneath my role at the time. But before I knew it, it enabled me to enter into a leadership role that allowed me to then further do the things that I wanted to do. And sometimes it's in that proactivity, it's in that creativity, that innovation within your working space that you actually find opportunities. And those opportunities have not gone away because there's a pandemic. In fact, being at home and working from home has opened new doors for development. It has opened new doors for one-on-one conversations, for team building exercises, for showcasing who you really are. In case you're someone who's more of an introvert, now is the time for you to reach out to people. Simple things like just checking in with your team via email, making sure that you stay visible to your superiors. Those are little tips and tricks that enable you to stay on people's minds, so that when those opportunities do come up, your name is the first thing that they think of. And for those who are service providers, or like, you know, consultancy firms, for example, or just third-party suppliers, at this time it can be really scary because, you know, as companies are reducing costs and trying to limit their fallout on their full-time staff, those are the first people to go. Those are the first things that change. But what I found, speaking to a lot of friends in that particular space, is that those that are surviving right now are those that have partnered with firms and are going over and beyond their regular contracts to provide services that are required in this time. I know a consultancy firm that is the only consultancy firm that has not been let go from a particular financial institution, simply because they've partnered with that institution. They gave discounts to them for thousands of staff that they've got onboarded. But not only that, they have walked into meetings and rooms where they're providing risk management services to them and providing things to them that was not within their initial contracts, but they recognize that's where the business is looking, because the business is worried about their forecasting for the year. And so they're providing those services, sometimes at a discount, sometimes for free, but they're becoming invaluable partners to that firm. And though the firm has let go of every other consultancy firm, they are refusing to let go of this particular firm because they see the value in them, and they've gone over and beyond to extend their budget to cover this firm. And I think that's the way that service providers should be looking at it, is the same way individuals, employees have to think about, how am I demonstrating value? Service providers also need to be thinking, how am I demonstrating value? Small businesses, suppliers, how am I going to add value to this firm when right now is a period of uncertainty and everybody is worried about their bottom line? But just to end, I will have to say that I have come I have done a full 360 from where I was. So previously, I was very much a worrywart. I was worried at the start of this. I didn't know what it meant for the year. I didn't know what it meant for my career, what it meant for my current situation. But I've had to learn to prune out perspectives that are not of God, that are not elevating me towards my set goal. So anything that was hindering me from being positive or being able to be creative was something that was stealing my peace and putting me in a place of constant worry and anxiety. It was affecting my performance at work because I was not able to execute in the way that I would normally, because I was worried, and everything somebody said was something that made me panic. I had to learn to weed out all the things that build the fear in me and convince myself that what's happening out there, so all the things that I'm hearing in the news, by the way, which I stopped listening to, is not as important as the things that have been promised to me, the things that have been promised to me, the things that I know are coming to me. And I find, I'm going to end it with a scripture. And this scripture has been kind of my mantra all the way through so far the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is in Isaiah 23 verse 6. And it says, it will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in him. Where is your trust being placed right now? Is it in the constantly changing environment, constantly changing statistics around us? Or is it in the hands of the one who has the hearts of kings in the palm of his hands? I know a lot of people are suffering during this time. I have a lot of friends that have been particularly affected in this time. And I hope I haven't been in any way during this been dismissive of that. But instead, all I'm trying to do is serve to remind you that there is hope. Romans 8:1 asks us to consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. While Philippians 4:4-7 reminds us to rejoice in the Lord always. And again, it says, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious for anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And this is my prayer to you all, for you all today, that the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds in Christ Jesus. Thank you once again for listening to this. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you all. I wish you all have an amazing week and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so very much.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to welcome you to the Marketplace Shift Conference. Why are we having this conference? Because the question I want to ask you is, after you survive this pandemic, will you succeed in the marketplace? And that's why we've put together a phenomenal artillery of speakers from various walks of life: oil and gas, banking and finance, fintech, people from the United States of America, from the UK, from Africa, the retail industry, manufacturing, telecoms, entrepreneurship. We've put together a phenomenal faculty that will look at the pandemic as we know it now and the challenges that organizations, individuals, and industries are facing, but more so, what will happen post-COVID-19 to your jobs, to your industry, and to the marketplace. I believe it's important for us to arm ourselves with knowledge so that when we have better insights to what the future holds, we can anticipate, prepare, and position ourselves to succeed in the marketplace. Join us in the Marketplace Shift as we listen to experts in their various fields that will prepare us to succeed post-COVID-19. I see you emerging victorious.
Mr. Kola Oyayami. He is an excellent and innovative commercial strategist with extensive award-winning experiences and achievements across industries. Over his illustrious career as a marketer, he has helped build some of the biggest brands in Nigeria today. Prior to working in the telecoms industry, he grew the Knorr brand to achieve its highest ever volume and value with his professional skills. An alumnus of Columbia Business School, Lagos Business School, Pan Atlantic University, Cranfield University UK, and Obafemi Awolowo University. He is a thought leader in marketing and the author of the first marketing book of its kind by any African catalogued by the US Library of Congress and adopted as a textbook for marketing and marketing communication by the Marketing and the Advertising Institutes in Nigeria and some Nigerian universities. Kill or Get Killed, the Marketing Killer Instinct. He is the founder of Ignite Africa, which is a non-governmental organisation founded in 2010. A huge passion for youths and helps to channel their potentials and energies into building a brighter future. The future of our nation and the future of Africa is the motivation behind its foundation. Welcome your conference speaker, Mr. Kola Oyayami.
My name is Kolawole Oyeyemi, and I work within the telecom sector. I'm a married man, somebody who has a passion for the things of God. So I also pastor a church, and I run a foundation, and we're doing this recording one of the facilities of the foundation, Ignite Africa Leadership Foundation. So in short, that's who I am. I'm about 50 and got some great children and a whole lot of community of good people around me. Well, globally, you see that the pandemic has had some tremendous impact on economies across the world right now. Whether it's in the advanced economies you want to talk about or in the developing economies as we call it. When you have a lockdown, automatically you grind the economy of that nation to a halt, okay? Economies thrive on transactions, exchanges of goods for value, okay? Or goods for money or value for money, whichever way you want to look at it. And so when you put a stop to that, what happens automatically is money tanks somewhere. So you have loads of money stashed up somewhere, but you can't exchange goods with it, okay? And when you have a situation where you can't have transactions, automatically you kill that economy. So the longer the lockdown in any state, in any economy, the worse it gets for the economy. And so in summary, what you find is that the lockdown has adversely affected a whole lot of economies right now. Whether it's in the manufacturing sector, you have situations where you can't get your input materials for your manufacturing. Even when you manufacture, you can't get them shipped out into the market, okay? Logistics has become a problem since the lockdown has begun because nobody wants to go out to go and distribute, okay, your goods and services. Even if you manage to distribute, the issue is you don't have people come to the marketplace to buy. When you look at the African context, okay, when you look at the developed economies where you have all the the hypermarkets where people can actually walk into stores or even order online, you've also seen that yes, there's been a spike in terms of what you call e-commerce, but it has not compensated for the impact of the lockdown on a whole lot of homes and families and people. And that's why you found at some point we had some level of anarchy across different countries in the world where people got to a point where they needed to transact. They needed to exchange. They needed goods and services and they couldn't get them. And hunger came in because they had the money, but they couldn't exchange the money for goods, for food to eat. And so what that does is it just kills transactions. And when you kill transactions, you kill the economy, okay? So manufacturing is suffering, okay? Distribution is suffering. Retail is suffering, especially, except where you have had some elements of e-commerce being done. But in Africa, it suffered. In Nigeria, we've had, an upsurge in the activities of the likes of Jumia, Konga, and Co. Because all of a sudden, they found that people now relied on them. So whatever issues they had before, they had to quickly scale up to meet up with the demands of the people. But you can imagine that they can only cater for a small percentage of the populace. What about the huge man? This is a country of 200 million. And so what you found is a case where people still found a way to run the economy, but it was never the way it should be. So people in the process will lose jobs or have lost jobs as you speak. Because Nigerians, in an economy where close to 80% of our populace or African populace are daily wage earners. I was still speaking with somebody in Kenya today, and he says to me, look, the numbers are spiking even in Nairobi right now. And I said, I know why. He said, what do you mean? I said, because people are daily wage earners. Okay, if they don't go out, they can't feed. If they don't go out, they can eat, they can take care of their families. And so at some point, they'll find a way to go out. And in finding a way to go out, they increase the propensity for the infection to grow. Okay, so what is really important is that when you look at the kind of structure of the economy, okay, and you look at the realities that people must eat, people must feed, and when these are made impossible, because all those things, when they happen, it makes transactions happen. When transactions happen, the economy grows. Now, when those things are made impossible to happen, automatically economies will come to a grinding halt. And the longer it draws out, the worse it gets. Okay, so when you look at it holistically, economies across the world, whether in the Western world, in Europe, in the developed economies, in the developing economies, it's the same thing. It's a bad hit on the economies of the world. Impact of the pandemic on employees. Right now, there's a whole lot of uncertainty. Okay, some have already happened. Okay, I know a couple of people who've called me and said, hey, this is what has happened, especially folks within the oil and gas sector right now. Okay, because there's a whole lot of oil that have been, drilled that can't be sold. All the OPEC countries have oil, they have no buyer for them. Because again, going back to transaction stopping, cars were not moving on the road, so consumption of fuel came to a full stop. Manufacturing concerns were not running, consumption of fuel came to a full stop. Okay, trains that run on locomotive, with locomotive engines are not running. So a whole lot of things came to a grinding halt. Airlines were not operational, so the airlines and the planes were not using aviation fuel. So all of a sudden, you find that the oil and gas that used to be like the bride of most economies, especially in this part of the world, they came to a standstill. And so already it's happening there. I know a couple of people who are within the oil servicing sector who have already been told to say, hey guys, we're stuck right now. We need you to step aside for a while. And so the real impact on employees, where it has not happened, is a lot of apprehension, a lot of anxiety. People are not sure what will happen tomorrow. They're not sure whether after COVID-19 they will still have a job, or if they have a job, whether they will be earning the kind of salary they were earning before. So there's a huge level of uncertainty. So you have what I call a double whammy of evil. Okay, one is the crisis of the virus itself. Okay, that is scaring people and making people get really, really worried about whether they say tomorrow. And then after the virus, people are saying, hey, right inside the virus, we got issues. There are a lot of people who were not paid in the last month that went by. Some people were paid half of their salaries, okay? Now, they're even worried now that after the virus may have gone, what becomes of their jobs? What becomes of their employment? What becomes of the businesses they're running? And so a whole lot of uncertainties are still out there in the environment. Anxieties, fear pervades the environment. And so when you talk about employment, it's a big question mark right now, that when COVID-19 is come and gone, okay, people need to pick up the pieces. Businesses need to pick up the pieces. Organizations need to pick up the pieces. They need to re-strategize, restructure, and find out whether they can still hold on to the people they have, or hold on to them at the terms that they had before. So it's a lot of uncertainty concerning employment right now. Well, when you talk about the staff being onshore, remember, your clients too are organizations or individuals, okay, who are either employees of organizations or employers of people. And so if it's affecting you the same way, it's affecting them. And so what you find is that a whole lot of organizations are reviewing their contracts with their clients or with their suppliers right now, saying, hey, guy, before this whole crisis came, we had this structured up. But this crisis has come and truncated things and disrupted things. We need to sit down again and have some conversations on how do we go forward from here, okay? And so it can be business as usual. When people come back and things return to what I call quote and unquote normalcy, because they can never be the old normalcy again, that old normal is gone for life, okay? So people have got to sit down and say, how do we restructure these contracts? How do we renegotiate whatever terms we had before in the light of things like that? Because there could be an error where an organization chooses to absorb, okay, oh, that's the contract we signed, that's the way it is, it can't be changed. Listen, you're not an island, okay? So you must come to the table. So it must be a win-win situation that organizations need to structure going into the future. It can't be a case of, that's my contract, you must fulfill the terms. No, because just as you were impacted, they were also impacted. Everybody must come to the table and say, how do we work out a way into the future that will ensure survival and that we thrive and prosper? Because that's the only way we can have an ongoing concern. If we don't do that, then the business dies. And you may be happy today that my business dies, but wait, yours is about to die down the line. So we must come to that realistic terms of renegotiating whatever deals we had before so we can progress forward together. Because you know that you need me, I need you. And so both of us, we need to survive. And to survive means we need to help one another come to some terms that are agreeable and help us to go into the future. So for me, that's where I think it's going to affect clients and the client contacts or whichever organizations you work with, either a B2B or a B2C. Well, different companies within different sectors have devised different strategies to survive, okay? Some immediately, the crisis came, before even lockdowns were pronounced, they chose to say, you know what, we need to restructure the way we work, okay? So they began working from home right before the lockdown were even announced by any government to say, look, with the realities on ground, we can't meet our contacts. We are not sure of where our contacts are coming from. We're not sure of the security and the safety of our environment. So why don't we just work from home right now? Now, that was enabled by technology. Okay, so one of the big things that companies embraced was technology. And it's for companies that were really conscious of the need to be very flexible and to be at the edge, at the cutting edge of technologies. Many of them kind of look as if they were prepared for what was coming. And so they were able to manage working from home, because working from home requires a whole lot of, technical, what I call synchronization of your initiatives and your organizations from division to division, departments to departments, and people to people, okay? So what you found was that some companies that were at the cutting edge of technology found it a lot easier to work from home immediately, okay? And so the impact on them was not as huge as those who were not prepared. Those that it just hit them like a bolt out of the blues. That was totally devastating. It took time before people ran around to say, okay, how do we find a way to work, okay? So some people relied on technology heavily and they were able to work from home. Some other people had to, I know some companies that actually camped people, okay? They just put them in a place, secure the place, and told them, sorry, you're not going to be with your family for the next couple of days, okay? We need to keep the organization running, because the truth is, if you don't keep that organization running, COVID-19 will come and go, okay? And if the organization died while COVID-19 was here, all of you will be dead after COVID-19. So you may survive the virus and not survive the consequences of the virus. So people relied on technology. Some people relied on, what I call native intelligence, to say, we are here. This is the crisis. We can't deny this is our reality today. What do we do? Okay, so they camped their staff that they consider as very important, critical staff to ensure the organization runs, and they took care of them and ensure that, it meant them, in the recent, they were really being socially distant from their family members for a while the lockdown lasted. Okay, so some people deployed that. Some other people were able to get some bit of what I call leeways with government to get some permit to move around, okay, and run skeletal services within that period. But for some people, it was boom time, okay, because all of a sudden the logistics business picked up, okay, e-commerce picked up, and so those people, especially people within what I call the food, I don't want to say food and beverage, but within consumables, things that people eat, okay, new businesses began to grow in the midst of that crisis, because people now saw that, look, this is the reality of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That after all of this, regardless of your money, your wealth, your house, your position, you got to eat. Okay, so food became so critical, and a whole lot of people became very creative about food. I saw a massive hotel in Nigeria, a massive hotel, okay, that would never have thought of home delivery, advertising home delivery. It was amazing. Okay, a massive 5-star hotel in Nigeria, advertising home delivery. Now, you ask yourself, why? And I said to folks, when he said to me, I said, you don't understand. Usually these guys will have stockpiled, okay? They got stock of materials to cook food, drinks, all of that. Now all of a sudden there's a lockdown. There's no clientele, okay? They have options. One, leave everything and it gets messed up, because these things are perishables, okay? Or be creative, be ingenious into say, how do we deploy these resources and ensure that we're still able to at least maximize value out of it? And so they were smart enough to say, okay, we'll do home delivery. You may laugh them to scorn, but guess what? They will utilize their stock and still manage to reduce their losses within the period. And so people became ingenious to say, how else do we cope within this period? And so new businesses emerged, new ways of doing things emerged, new opportunities opened up, and people who were smart enough to jump on it exploited it. And so while some people were crying and throwing their hands in the air and saying, it's over, some people are saying, wow, what a great time. I mean, you're talking of face masks. Now you have all sorts of designs of face masks, okay? Those are businesses that were not in existence before. So the ingenuity of people, the creativity of people, the passion of people came through in the course of this COVID-19 lockdown. And I believe that once those things are triggered, they never die. So I'm looking forward to a post-COVID-19 where you see a lot of creative stuff within the environment. People coming up with things that are, ordinarily you never expect people to come up with. And I'm actually looking forward to great things after COVID-19. Well, the reality is the economy has changed already. So it's not a case whether it will change. It's changed already, okay? One of the things is, I was reading some journal early hours of today, and some interviews were conducted across Europe and America, and the question was, how soon do you think the economy will bounce back? And even in the US, 43%, we don't think it will bounce back quickly, okay? In Europe, a lot of them are giving 50%, 40%, 45%. That's the range. So it's about halfway. People are saying it's a 50-50 chance right now. Now, what that means is that this thing may draw out for a long period beyond COVID-19. Okay? So you're going to have slow recovery, number one. And so if you were thinking of growth before, first thing right now is to recover first. Okay? Before you can say you want to grow. You need to get back yourself to where you used to be before you can now go to where you desire to be at the end of the day. So what I see is that between now and half year, you're going to have some very slow growth. People are going to take things a bit one step at a time, trying to fathom out how things will work, how things will play out. When we get into the second half, especially the third quarter, I foresee some momentum gathering. Because human beings were very interesting people. In the heat of the crisis, everybody shouted, give us 2 months. It will look as if this crisis never happened. Life returns back and people are already running again. So I am looking forward to a third quarter that will be very, very active. Historically, third quarters are slow quarters, but I am foreseeing a different third quarter this year because that's when people are going to play catch up to whatever they may have lost in the first and second quarter of the year. And so I see slow recovery till half year, but from the third quarter, I see things picking up a bit faster than it will be in the second quarter. And by the fourth quarter of the year, I think things are going to get back to their normal. Because, again, what you find is that a whole lot of monies have not been spent right now. Okay? By the third, fourth quarter, there'll be some pressure to get things done. And the economies will bounce back, I believe. But it's not going to be a fast recovery. It's going to be a slow recovery. And then we'll begin to see some growth within the third and the fourth quarter of the year. That's my view of how the economies grow. But that's going to be also industry dependent. Okay? There are some industries that will return back quickly. There's some industries that will be slow, and there's some that will be even slower than that. Okay? I mean, we look at the oil and gas today, it looks like the whole world is crashed. But the reality is, we need oil and gas still today. Yes, we say, okay, there are alternative sources of energies, but they're not in the quantum to compensate for the volume of consumption that happens right now. And so, within the next couple of weeks, as life returns back to normal, those oil that people are unable to sell, we'll soon sell them. Okay, and life will pick up again. It might not be at the pace that it used to be, but it's going to pick up again. And I'm hopeful that even the cost of the crude will also appreciate. Okay, and life will get better, especially for my dear country, Nigeria. The biggest challenge that I foresee after the pandemic is a lot of what I call knee-jerk reactions. Okay, knee-jerk reactions where employers are scared and they think the first thing to do is to strip. First thing to do is to fire. First thing to do is to reduce staff. First thing to do. And we're already seeing signs of that in the environment. Now, if that is permitted to happen, it will create a bigger crisis. Okay, you're coming from a people who already bastardized psychologically. Okay, who have come to a point where they were willing to walk on the streets and say, if I die, I die. Okay, because I need to feed. You're talking to a group of people who have all actually looked at life and say, you know what? What's all this hype worth after all? Okay? And now you fire them. Okay? You just ignited some waiting fire, waiting to burn. Okay? And so for me, from a responsible government perspective and responsible organizational leadership perspective, I think that may be the biggest challenge that organizations have to grapple with. To say, between me having a social conscience of looking at the implications or the consequences of my actions on the larger society, and me looking at my company and hitting my targeted profit margin or my desired value, which one weighs more important? That's going to be a big challenge for organizations. Organizations are set up for profit, okay? But there's also a social conscience that you must have, that this action, if I do it, will it not even in the short and medium term even mortgage the existence of my own organization? Okay, those are the big issues that organizations have got to deal with in the few weeks coming, because if they don't deal with it, you may get a short-term gain. You say, okay, I dispense with this, but the consequences of it may actually consume you in the medium to long term. So for me, I think that's going to be the biggest issue, because listen, organizations are set up to make profit. Let me say that again. Shareholders are not emotional people. Okay? But the responsibility now is on management of organizations to convince owners of organizations to say, guys, we can do this now. And wrap it up and say, bye-bye, everybody go. But the consequences can be beyond where if we don't have a people who are already bastardized to this point, maybe it will be a different case. But people right now are easily prone to violence. People are edgy right now. Any little thing, there's a spark of fire. Now, that's not the time you want to do that, because if you do it, it might start from a domestic level and then escalate. And then escalate. Before you know what's happening, you can't go out. Now, no longer because of COVID-19, but because of the anger of the people. And I don't think it will be a safe thing. So from a responsible government point of view, and like I said, a responsible organizational leadership point of view, those are issues that people have to grapple with and ultimately take what I call a reasoned decision, which, I mean, is left to leadership of organization and the country to deal with. But it's going to be a very testy case, a challenging moment for organizations and governments. Well, I think the reality is for business owners to remain profitable post-COVID-19, you need to unlearn what you knew, learn new things, and reskill yourself. Okay? If you were not pro-technology before, it's time for you to wake up to that reality. That you need to find, how can I update, augment, and optimize value in my business using technology? That time is now. Okay. Number two is, more than ever before, there are some costs that I'll call permissible costs that you had in your business before. It's time to strip those costs off. Okay, to say, yeah, these things are, I mean, like the Bible will say, all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient. Okay, there are some things that are nice to haves. Okay, it's time to do it with the nice to haves and say, for now, let the nice to haves step aside. Let's deal with what I call the fundamentals that will ensure your profitability and sustainability in the business. You can't be emotional at this point in time. Okay, there are certain things that you know, if maybe it's a benefit to start. You know that if they don't have it, heavens won't crash. And you let them know that we need to do this so that the business can survive. Okay? Now, those are conversations that need to be had with the people you work with, the organizations you work with, and the individuals that work with you. Okay? So for me, for you to remain profitable, you need to rethink your business. Okay? You need to reimagine your business. Okay? You need to restructure your business to take away what again call the nice to haves that you can dispense with today until a time when things are a lot better. Second big point for me is that it's time for you to ask yourself, if I look at my supply chain within my business, how do I get my input and my output? It's time also to see where in that chain can I have technology help me to optimize value. Okay? All right. It can't be the same way I was doing it before. What else can I now do now digitally? What can I do virtually right now? What's the variance in my cost of putting such technologies in my business and the cost of doing it manually the way I'm doing it today? So you got to be very, very clinical in reassessing every element of your organization and your business and saying to yourself, where can I optimize, augment, and how can I use technology to help me in that dimension? So it's so important that at this point in time, you got to do a rethink of your business. Okay, it does not mean necessarily laying off staff, like I did say before. It might just mean, you know what, there are some nice to haves. I mean, I'm sure if you have a conversation with yourself, say, you know what, you used to have this kind of luxuries before. Well, guys, we need to step those luxuries down so we can keep you working. I mean, that's a sound and reasonable conversation. I mean, no crazy man will say, okay, I used to drink tea 3 times a day in the office before. Now I'm going to be drinking tea just once today to preserve cost. And you say, no, I must drink my tea. And then maybe you go and drink your tea at home. Okay, so those are what I call reasonable conversations, but it behoves on the organization and the leadership of the organization to say, how else can we optimize value and ensure we remain profitable in the light of the consequences of COVID-19? But it cannot be business as usual. Well, I think advising employees to remain employable post-COVID-19 is almost exactly the same as advising business owners to remain, still a viable organization post-COVID-19, okay? Every employee now knows that things cannot be the way they used to be, okay? You now need to, now that you have a responsibility to update yourself, to augment your own skill, your knowledge base right now. Things cannot be business as usual. The same way with employees, okay? If you were the one who does 9 to 5 before, I just do the basic that is expected of me, all right? When you have organizations where people are so clinical to a point of they are considering, look, I got to shed some weight. Then you realize at some point that, look, my value that I create in the organization becomes a critical measurement criteria to see whether I stay or I go, all right? And so if you understand that now, this is an opportunity for you to change your perspective, change your paradigm to how you see the job that you do. That you see every job you do as a privilege, as an opportunity, because you're less than X% of Nigerians who have the kind of jobs you're doing or who are gainfully employed like you. So what is so important is that employees first must also unlearn what they've learned before. Learn new skills, chart new courses, be adventurous in learning, okay? And ask yourself again, in the light of these circumstances, how else can I be more relevant in the scheme of things? How else can I create value to my organization or even beyond my organization? That's one. Number 2 is to say, beyond my daily job again, what else can I do to create value in the environment? Because all of a sudden, we all discover that it's no longer just about how good or how well off I am. It's not about community. Because we suddenly woke up and realized that during this lockdown, people who never called you 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, as somebody got stuck and they were calling you. So all of a sudden we woke up to the fact that, hey, we're still a member of a community. Okay, and so beyond your 9 to 5, what else can you do to begin to have influence, impact in how that community becomes a more successful and more sustainable community? That's again for me what's important, that people need to realize in the emerging economies that is coming. So it cannot be just about you again. It cannot be just because now the reality hits you in the face. Listen, it can't be just about you. Before you can say it's just me and my family, and okay, it's no longer that because your own peace is dependent on the peace of a larger community. So apart from you having to reskill, retool, re-understand, reimagine yourself, okay, retrain yourself, relearn new things to become more relevant in the scheme of things, you also must think of how do I become a lot more influential, okay, within the larger society, first from my immediate community and by and by to the larger society. So it cannot be business as usual again, whether it's for employers or for employees. People must shape up. I think we're already seeing the industries, the jobs that would thrive. I mean, a lot of industries will thrive, okay, but one of the biggest ones that will thrive, which COVID-19 has shown to us, the lockdown has shown to us, is food. People must eat. I mean, I tried to look good as a young man, okay? All right? In the course of this lockdown, I looked at my clothes, I saw my shoes, and I asked myself, I can't wear these shoes outside. Okay? I can't wear these suits outside. Okay? They were there. But for a whole month, I was practically in shorts and t-shirts around the house. So all of a sudden, that reality dawned on everybody. That what we chase all over the place, at the end of the day, it was about food that you eat and drink, survival first. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs came back to reality. And so if you extend that, one of the big industries that will thrive and grow post-COVID-19 is the food industry. That's one. I'll call it hospitality industry if you want to extend it and give it some nicer feel. Okay, hospitality industry, one. Number two, the clothing industry. I mean, and we've seen a lot of creativity in Nigerians right now. I mean, there are designs now that are celebrating COVID-19, unfortunately, okay? But they are nice designs, and people are wearing them. Face mask used to be something that must be very clinical, very, almost medicinal, the way it's designed. But in Nigeria, it's become a fashion, okay? Now people have different designs and different styles that you now see people wear it and take pictures and post on the social media, showing you different styles of it. Now people have moved away from face masks to do designs of a complete dress combined with face mask. I mean, I saw one a few days back, fantastic. Shirts. Somebody made shirts, and instead of making, pockets, handkerchiefs or whatever you call it, it's made face mask to replace that. Now, because time wears out fashion. If you buy a clothing material today, as long as you wear it, it will wear out at some point. So you need to replace. So the replacement cycle is higher and faster. And whatever has a replacement cycle that is fast is a good business to look at. Okay? So those ones too will thrive. Okay? Now, there are things that we consume every day that we move around. Those things will still thrive. Transportation will still thrive. Okay? People still need to commute from one point to the other. Yes, we can put rules and regulations around it, don't do this, don't do, but listen to me, people must still commute, okay? So, like I said, oil and gas will bounce back because the means of fueling those cars is still the good old oil and gas, okay? Technology will boom because all the people that were caught at the wrong end of the stick, okay, by the lockdown, will suddenly wake up and say, hey guys, we need to now take technology as a critical element of our entire, business structure and strategy. Okay, so technology is also going to be, people are going to be looking for solutions that will enable them to work, remotely. People are going to be looking for solutions that will help them to optimize their operations. So technology is also going to boom. Okay, so I see a whole lot of things coming back, but again, like I said, it's going to be industry by industries. They are not all going to come at the same pace, but quite a number of industries are going to come back bouncing, especially technology. Okay, my advice to people is, one, don't live in fear. That's number one, okay? Because fear, my Bible tells me, has torment, okay? And in my place, there's something we say, don't die before your death, okay? So the first thing is don't live in fear. And people will tell you, this is happened, the infection has spiked up, blah, 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 blah. Don't live in fear, okay? Because if you live in fear, you die before your death. Okay, for me that's important, especially if you're a Christian. I mean, you shouldn't even be in a place where fear dominates you. Okay, and for you not to live in fear, it means you need to watch what you consume. Okay, what I mean by what you consume is not food. Okay, what kind of news do you consume? There are people who have up-to-date information on the number of deaths per country. Okay, there are people who have up-to-date information on the number of infections per country. But in the midst of all of this, there are recoveries. They don't focus on that. I was sharing with people, I said, in the midst of this, people are getting married. In the midst of people are getting pregnant. In the midst of people are giving birth. Okay? Now, you have a choice to pollute your mind or to edify yourself. Okay? So if all you consume are the negatives, then ultimately you are inviting negativity into your life. So my advice is, number one, don't live in fear. Number two, mind what you consume. Don't pollute your mind. Don't pollute your heart. Because whatever you ingest is what you digest, and that's what you become ultimately. Okay, Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So you project what you want to become by so mind what you intake. The more you intake negative things, that's what your mind processes. Okay, the mind has no will of its own. All right, it's what you feed it, and if you feed negative thought, what you're going to get is negative. So be careful and number three is be careful what you say. Okay, because we are powerful people, we don't know. Our words are not casual. So the words that I speak to you, they're spirit and they are life. Okay, so I say not before an angel, it was an error. Okay, now we need to be careful about what we say, and a lot of times again, because they are linked, it is what you ingest that determines what you say. So when you understand the causal linkages in these issues, you be careful about what you allow into your mind. because what you're allowing to your mind is what ultimately controls you. So my advice is don't live in fear. Be careful of what you ingest, what you consume. Be careful of what you say. The fourth thing is be careful what you do. Okay? Because if my Bible tells me, say you're not a confederacy to them, to whom they will say confederacy, and do not fear their fears, but sanctify the Lord of hosts in your heart. Let him be your fear, let him be your dread. Okay? Your actions are propelled by your thoughts. Okay? Now, if your thoughts are negative, your actions are going to be negative. So ultimately, you become a summary of your consumption. Okay, so my advice is don't be in fear. Mind what you consume. Mind what you allow into your heart. Okay? Mind what you process. Mind what you say, and mind what you do. That's only one hand. On the second hand is you need to tell yourself, what I knew before COVID-19 was good enough for pre-COVID-19. I need to know more things beyond COVID-19. I need to learn more things beyond COVID-19. I need to take on more skills beyond COVID-19. I need to become more versatile beyond COVID-19. I need to learn new skills, learn new things that can help me to become a lot more robust individual, because the realities of post-COVID-19 is not the same reality that I had before COVID-19. So you must be willing to learn new things. Number 3 for me is you must change your orientation about the fact that it's no longer about you. It's about community. We're no longer individuals. That's the way God made us in the first place. He didn't make us to be individuals. He looked at Adam and said, it's not good that this man be alone. He made us as human beings that will be connected to other humans. Okay? Now, COVID-19 has shown us that no man is an island, that we all need one another. So we need to change our orientation from I, me, and myself, what I call the trinity of the self, to now know that we need people. You need to be connected to people. You need to relate with people. You need to touch people. Let people touch you. That way we can create a better world. That would be my advice to people. You know, I won't be happy to close this conversation without, because I'm a pastor, okay, apart from being active in the marketplace. I'm a pastor a church, Chapel of Uncommon Grace in Lagos, Nigeria. And so I cannot close this conversation without some reference to scripture. Because I look at the season we are in, and I look at the apprehensions in the world, I look at the fears that people have, I look at the concerns that people are expressing, that when this crisis is over, what becomes of me? And I want to leave this with us. And that's the story of Joseph in the Bible. Okay. The Bible said Pharaoh had a dream that he couldn't understand. And God, by his grace, gave Joseph an understanding of the dream, so he could interpret the dream. But not only that, he then gave a solution to the problem, because the dream was a problem. It was an expression of a problem. We then gave a solution to the problem, and of course, the Pharaoh said, there's no other person who has an understanding of this, so you go fix the problem. Now, I need you to understand something. Before Joseph, there were wise men, there were soothsayers, there were advisors to Pharaoh. But when Joseph came on the scene, all of a sudden, an old order became irrelevant. They couldn't fathom out how to interpret the dream. They were totally at a loss. So the old order was shut down. Let me say this to us. Some old orders are shut down already with COVID-19. They will never again happen again. Never. That's one reality we must face. Okay? But it didn't end there. Now, the moment that old order was shut down, Joseph was given a mandate. You're the one that interpreted the dream. You gave the solution. Go make it happen. And all of a sudden, by that singular instruction, new industries emerged in Egypt. Okay? Maybe before in Egypt, there was no construction of silos. It was nobody's business. Okay? Now, because they needed to stock materials, all of a sudden, people with skills to build silos were required. Maybe before then, there was no need for logistics on a mega scale. But all of a sudden, in order to ensure that those materials were saved, there was a need to have an excellent logistics structure and systems and processes to ensure how the stock will come from the farms, how they'll be transported into the city, how they'll be stored in the barns, and how they'll be kept. Again, maybe then there was no formal storage structure, or by preservatives, to say if we keep wheat here for a while, it will get destroyed. But all of a sudden, there was a need to have preservatives for those wheat. And so a new industry also came from there. Okay. Now, to secure those things, you needed security. Okay. Now, all of a sudden, some new industries also emerged from there. Okay. Now, that's looking at the post-harvest. But let's even pause before you get to the harvest. Before the harvest, there was a planting. Now, remember, because something strange was in the horizon. And so when the planting season came, it was not normal planting that was done. They had to expand, extend, change, restructure their planting systems and organization because they needed a huge harvest so they can store so much, especially because the prophecy had gone forth that the harvest coming will be plenteous harvest, which means the more you sow, the more you have the propensity and the capability to, and the opportunity to have more. And so even the planting structure and systems had to be changed. Okay, but wait a minute. There were farmers before this time. Okay, those farmers had a choice. They either learned new skills of how to farm, or they were humble enough to say, sorry, this is where we were doing things before, but we want to know how you do things now. Or they could say, sorry, no, you guys don't know anything. This is the way we were doing it since 1904. And that's the way we go. They will disappear in the scheme of things. So what am I saying in all of this? We need to be flexible at this point. We need to be teachable at this point. We need to be open-minded at this point. We need to be willing to learn like children at this point. Sometimes those who will teach us at this point may be our children. Listen, Joseph was a young man. He was teaching old folks. All right? He was a young man. The advisors in the palace were not young people. I mean, apart from the fact that you have wisdom, age was also very important in those ages. But at that point, the ages were immaterial. So what am I saying? We must bring ourselves as a people to a point where we're saying to ourselves, whatever I knew before now may be good enough before now, but they're not good enough for the reality of today. And so, just as the way it was in Egypt, new things are going to happen. New industries are going to emerge. New opportunities are going to emerge. New industries are going to spring up here and there. The choice is in our hands. Whether we want to sulk about an old dying industry or want to wake up to embrace new realities. Things will never again go back to where it was. The moment Joseph gave that dream, Egypt was never again the same. It was not accidental when Pharaoh said, only by thy word shall my people be ruled. Because he was like, look, in your hand is a solution to survive. So if people say, no, don't listen to him, they are dead. Now, our reality today is things have changed and they have changed for good. We can either choose to bury our head in the sand and say, no, I'm not going to change, I'm not going to, because it's possible. Especially when you have been doing something so well for so long that if they wake you up in the middle of the night, you have an answer. And all of a sudden they're telling you it's not going to work again. Natural resistance will come up. I know, what do you mean? What are you talking about? But listen carefully. If you want to thrive, not just survive, you want to thrive in the emerging economy, you must be willing to re-examine what you used to know and come to terms that you need to know new things. And be humble enough, because that's very important, humility. Because the person that will teach you might be your boy yesterday, okay? But is in tune with the new realities. So if you are too haughty, if you are too proud to humble yourselves and learn, you'll be extinct. And the reality that's coming has no emotions. Okay? Because when Joseph took the assignment, there were no emotions. It's either he did it and Egypt survived, or he didn't do it and Egypt died. Okay? So those are not emotional issues. They were straight issues that he had to deal with. The same way we are in an environment where we got to deal with straight issues. So people should not fool themselves that this thing will come, blow over and go. No. It's changed. The world has changed. And we need to just wake up to that reality and know that the only way to thrive and prosper in the emerging future we're seeing is to unlearn a lot of things that we've learned and be humble enough. That's very important. Very, very humble. Each time I look at that scripture, I ask myself, Potiphar, where was he? When that thing happened, he was a captain in the army. So possibly he was in the palace when that thing happened, when that competition happened. How did he get home that day? What did he tell his wife? And when he told his wife, do you remember that boy? He said, which boy? He said, Jesus, that's stupid. What did he say? He said, he's no longer a stupid boy. He's now the prime minister. I said, what? How will Potiphar's wife feel? Okay. Now, many of us represent Potiphar right now. We're the big lord of the minnow, the big boys in town, the big girls in town. All of a sudden, things changed. Are we humble enough? The Bible never told us what happened to Potiphar. Okay, but are we humble enough to come to terms with the new realities and be humble enough to learn from those who know, so we can thrive and prosper and be able to lead in the future that is emerging? So I just hope that we don't become despondent, we don't become too haughty, too proud, not to re-examine our current realities in the face of the emerging realities and say to ourselves, I need humility to learn from people who know more than I do so that I can thrive, prosper, and succeed into the future. That's my closing remark to this, to say it's so important. Just learn what happened in Egypt, because that's exactly, it might not be famine, but it's something like it. And the future has changed, and we better be ready to embrace that future.
On the back of the fact that we're dealing with a very real and very virulent situation at this point in time, unprecedented times, like people say, and it's going to, as it were, bring about diverse issues and challenges, not just health challenges, social and economic challenges. And I believe it's important to prepare ourselves for what is ahead, and not just to learn to survive, but to learn to succeed in the midst of this particular crisis that we find ourselves. One can say that the future of work has shifted. Not only is there a global shift, but there is a marketplace shift. The market has shifted, many industries have shifted, many jobs or work as we know it has shifted. And so whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, an accountant, you can't just go and do project management because everybody is doing project management. You can't just do a networking because you have to think, because the new economy is going to shed excess weight. It definitely is going to. And the people who will remain viable and employable are people who understand these things I'm speaking about. And businesses and solutions are the ones that will survive and succeed. Yes, there will be an emergence of digital, not just digital businesses, but also logistics businesses. The only organizations that adapt and innovate will survive. Everything is going to be e-services, but you know what that presents? The reason why I'm mentioning this is that, you see, if everybody is going digital, you know what that means? We all need increased bandwidth. Listen to this. All these various things I'm talking about are the opportunities that are going to be created in this new economy. Are you looking to go into business? Open your eyes, study these areas, and begin to prepare for it. Only employees who can reskill and respond quickly will survive. People can work remotely now and still work effectively. How can we succeed in this post-COVID economy? When you enter into the job market, you must always think, what are my core competencies? And what are the opportunities in the marketplace? And how can my competencies fit those needs? And how do you reinvent? You reinvent based on your core competence. Honda, the organization Honda is into engines. And so by reason of their company, they can reinvent from a car company to making motorbikes. And like many car companies have done, you can reinvent to create ventilators. But they cannot reinvent to make mobile phones. I mean, what I'm saying is reinvention has to do with something that is close to your abilities. You have to learn to reskill. The people who will survive and succeed in this new economy are the people who will develop digital skills. And the people who will not make it are the people who have not upskilled. You can, when we talk about reskilling, you can also develop new competencies altogether. What does that mean? But that's a lot of hard work and time and money and energy. Blockbuster died because it failed to reposition itself. There's no point working harder at brick and mortar bookstores because Amazon has taken over. The bookstores that don't reposition themselves are over. You either evolve, that is adapt, or you become extinct.
Lord Michael John Hastings, Baron Hastings of Scarisbrick CBE, is the former Global Head of Corporate Citizenship for KPMG International. He was previously the BBC's Head of Public Affairs and then the first Head of Corporate Responsibility, 2003 to 2006. He is the second Chancellor of Regent's University London. Michael is also a trustee of the Vodafone Group Foundation and a Vice President of UNICEF and Tier Fund. He was previously a non-executive director of British Telecom. In 2005, Hastings was awarded a peerage to the House of Lords by Queen Elizabeth II, where he sits as a crossbencher. In the same year, he also received the UNICEF Award from the UK Chancellor for his outstanding contribution to understanding and effecting solutions for Africa's children. In 2009, he became a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Council on Diversity and Talent. In 2014, Hastings was conferred with a doctorate in civil law from the University of Kent, Canterbury, in recognition for his leadership at KPMG and the BBC on international development and corporate responsibility. Welcome your keynote speaker, Lord Michael Hastings.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to join you for this important conference on Marketplace Shift. And you've asked me specifically to reflect on what is going to be the political reality of this period that some are calling AC, after coronavirus. We've already heard of BC. We might have thought of that as before Christ, but they're saying no, it's before coronavirus. In other words, the years we lived in and grew accustomed to, even the months before we got to this point in March for many of us, where all of a sudden life stopped as we knew it, and we took on a new paradigm altogether. We began to think of ourselves as being, some might say, entrapped, locked down. Now we head towards what we're calling AC, the after coronavirus, the release period. And naturally, because life has changed so dramatically for us and for our families, for our friends, our communities, our churches, our gatherings, so much has also changed in the real world outside, beyond us. And probably at the epicenter of all of this has been a dramatic change in how we see politics, politicians, and political thinking. We've lived, many of us, in democracies for the better part of 50 to 70 years. Since the Second World War, we've watched the rise of a new engagement of the public in the decision-making of government. And we've pulled away from autocratic controls. We've watched individuals gain freedoms which in previous generations way back were never thought possible, and ideologies have shifted dramatically. And here we are, at this juncture, at this conference, for many watching, for many around the world, still under the control of the decision-making of governments. We would never have contemplated that in 2019. Politics has become centre stage, and most of us would now say to good effect. This isn't about dictation or the elimination of democracy. It's about a redefinition of the purposes of government. Politics has taken on a beneficial positive. And however disengaged we were before, now at long last, maybe mass numbers in our population understand that politics is there for our better good. So I want to take you through some thinking over the course of the next 40 minutes. Some of it mine, a lot of it I have garnered from what I would call experts, serious men and women of perception, historical men and women of perception. I have my own strong thoughts, but I think it's good to learn the wisdom of those who thought before us, alongside us, and probably with greater responsibility. So let's think about this subject of what will be the P in the AC, politics after coronavirus. I'm going to start with a few thoughts that come from a man whose name should be well known. This is Herman Van Rompuy, President of the European Policy Centre and President Emeritus of the European Council. In other words, the man responsible some years back for galvanizing the governments of Europe to leading the council group that brought together the prime ministers and presidents of Europe in order to make the decisions that now make up the EU. And a reminder that however we may feel or not feel about the EU in the United Kingdom, it is the largest trading bloc of countries on earth. It has the largest collective population outside of China and India on earth, if you put the countries together, and it has a larger economy than the United States. So the EU is a centrifugal force of thinking, but maybe not necessarily of power. I record this for you on the day in which 8 governments came together across Europe. Well, and including Japan and including Saudi Arabia, but not the United States. Ironically, to pull together a pandemic fund, a fighting fund to back the vaccine. Interesting, whoever gets the vaccine first may be tempted to say, as a country, we hold on to it, we need it for our people, we inoculate our people, and therefore we win. But this is a collective effort to say that this disease, this virus, this new invisible reality that has hit us doesn't respect borders, and its solution shouldn't respect borders either. There is a kind of world government emphasis. Yes, we've had the United Nations, but it is an agency. We have the G7 and the G20, but they are collective gatherings. But now we need something different, because this is life and death stuff. This isn't just ideas. Well, let me begin with Herman Van Rompuy. This crisis, he says, is about life and death. Had we done nothing, the cost of human life would have been enormous and many times higher than what a normal winter flu would bring. A virus emerges somewhere in the world and every country is on its knees. We become so interdependent and so vulnerable. The primacy of politics had to give way, he says, to experts and scientists. Until recently, experts and scientists were presented as unworldly and irrelevant. How hollow now the slogan, "Take back control," sounds. The crisis also spiraled out of control in countries that were ruled by populists. The heroes now are not the populist elite, not the celebrities, not the loud shouters, not those with the largest numbers of clicks, but doctors, care workers, ordinary men and women who at great personal risk save lives and keep society running. Once again, the facts are the ideologists' greatest enemy. The opponents of a strong and big government are waning. Only governments can turn the tide. The markets are wavering. Private investors are paralyzed with uncertainty and fear. Protecting everyone is ultimately the task of government, the most basic function of the state to protect the life and limbs of its citizens is back in the fore. Now, we've had pandemics before. Viruses are not new. Most of us would have been inoculated against smallpox, mumps, measles, rubella. We would have all had some way in which the doctor has told us that we no longer need to think about polio, for example. Pandemics go way back. 541 to 542, the plague of Justinian, 30 to 50 million killed. And interestingly, some historians say that plague brought about the collapse of the Roman Empire because it rotted from within by sickness as well as maybe its moral fabric. The Spanish flu, 1918 to 1990, somewhere between 40 to 50 million killed across Europe. Smallpox, 1520, 56 million killed. And the bubonic plague, 1347 to 1351. The Black Death, the outbreak wiped out 30 to 50% of Europe's population, and it took nearly 200 years to recover. We've seen mass viruses before. In 1911, there was a deadly epidemic spreading through China, and it threatened to become a global pandemic. Its origins related to the trade in wild animals, but at the time, nobody was quite sure where exactly it had begun, but they knew it was there. 60,000 people died in modern-day northeast China, making it one of the world's largest epidemics at the time. But in 1912, when the epidemic had receded, not fully passed, but receded, the Chinese government convened the International Plague Conference in the northeast city of Shenyang. Then, those who were experts, virologists, bacteriologists, scientists, politicians, thinkers, gathered together, brought by boat, brought to China from the United States, Japan, Russia, the United Kingdom, and France. Then we didn't have mass media, we didn't even have television. But the world recognized, with what limited information it had, that the powers of the world had to come together in a new globalism to deal with what could be a threat to all. The response was one of responsible political leadership. Gordon Brown was interviewed, the former British Prime Minister, was interviewed in the New Statesman magazine just a week ago. The headline was, "The solution is still global." He was asked a series of questions about where does this take our political settlement. Why Gordon Brown? Well, he was the Prime Minister who, right at the heart of the global financial crisis, the beginning, 2008, this was a crisis that ran 2008 to 2012, but the bulk of it 2008, 2010. He was the Prime Minister then. He'd been the Chancellor here in the United Kingdom before. He was the one who had to steer the deeply unsettled ship of the banking crisis into some kind of new order and had to take dramatic action, coordinated around the world, to stop the seeding of finance that was literally hemming out into the oceans. So Gordon Brown was asked this very important question. Is this the beginning of deglobalization? If the world came together in 1912 to create global institutions, and we've become known to have the United Nations, the G7, now the G20, the gathering of collective bodies, the World Health Organization, global institutions which are there to provide, to protect, to inform, help us to lead responsible, free lives. Is this the beginning of deglobalization? This is what he said. People have tried to make a distinction between a global crisis and a crisis of globalization. It is undoubtedly a crisis of globalization. Whether it's the beginning of the end of the global supply chains, the global flows of capital, the global communications, I doubt. But I think it's going to force us to rethink what we mean by the management of the global economy. It's going to force us to rethink what constitutes the right policies for a global society. It is the beginning of a period of quite intense rethinking, partly because we enter it having had a period of protectionism. The first few years of the past decade brought a very defensive nationalism, which I would call protectionism. Closing borders, cutting back on immigration, building walls, imposing tariffs. In the past 2 or 3 years, we've moved to a more aggressive nationalism, which is America first, India first, China first, Great Britain first, and everything else. You see, you've got it, if you like, a global coalition of anti-globalists. Some of the assumptions of globalization are being challenged, but it actually makes it more important that we put the case for global cooperation rather than simply accept that certain countries are resistant to it. And as the conversation goes on, he's asked to focus really essentially on what is the nub of the challenge that will now face global leadership institutions, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the G7, the G20, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, the EU. What is the single greatest challenge that this raises for politics? Globalism, globalization, the new global coordination is necessary. This is what he says. I think then that we've got to look at the fairness of the distribution of resources in society. The inequity that has been exposed is now the global challenge. Why are certain countries and communities more at risk? How are health systems so broken in many places? We're grateful that we live in a country here in the United Kingdom that could throw together a 4,000 bed hospital in 9 days and could open 5 more around the country, and thankfully now not required. We were able to say we have the resources, a brilliant army, phenomenal military reserves, equipment we could galvanize from every corner of the country. We could literally create health systems virtually overnight, and some countries couldn't do it in decades. That imbalance in our world is the really big AC after coronavirus, the PAC, the politics after coronavirus. Well, the relationship between politics and the market is undeniable. And probably one of the smartest thinkers on this is an American business advisor called Erwin Stelzer. Just take time to Google him, you'll see he's pretty close to some famous people. Well, Erwin Stelzer was writing in the Sunday Times 2 weeks ago, and he is reflecting on the big change that is now coming. And he says it like this: despite its virtues, talking about the market, capitalism will not emerge from this crisis unchanged. Government will play a larger role. Managed trade will replace free trade. As the age of globalization comes to an end, the private sector will be ringed around with more regulation on everything from executive pay to the treatment of staff. Some changes will involve a trade-off of efficiency for fairness to gain greater public acceptance of capitalism. Many will require what John Maynard Keynes described in another connection as a serious disturbance of the vested interests. Not a bad thing. So as we're thinking about globalization, inequality, the duty on politicians to redress the imbalances that our world has become used to, it's worth giving a little bit of factual context here. We have been horrified by the deaths of every individual, every family affected, everyone who has gone into a hospital or a care home and has not come out. Mass burials in parts of the world, looking at fields full of graves just dug over. And as every individual who has lost their life through coronavirus is a serious impact on a family, on friends, on loved ones, there are also the realities of common death in our world. We know that on average, every day, somewhere between 25 to 30,000 children under the age of 5, 6 are dying from water-based diarrhea-related diseases. Poverty is a killer. Basic things are a killer. And our world takes little notice of that. We've had decades of opportunity to address. Yes, money has flowed through aid and a certain amount through foreign investment, but in reality it has been easier to ignore than to engage. Well, I was reading some insights and I'll just pass them to you because I think it's important to have them. Then on top of the costs of the domestic lockdowns and slowdowns come the effects of the global economic crash. As growth plunges everywhere, demand for some of the commodity exports that poorer countries rely on is also falling. The global oil price has fallen below $20 a barrel, its lowest in 18 years, and this is disastrous for countries such as Nigeria, where government finances depend on an oil price nearer to $100. Falls in the prices of copper, particularly affecting Zambia and Chile, flowers affecting Kenya and Ethiopia, tin affecting Bolivia and Myanmar, have hit other commodity-dependent economies. India's exports, especially food products, metals and engineering goods, fell by a record 35% in March. Travel dramatically affected, tourism undermined. The International Monetary Fund is forecasting Indian growth of just 1.9% this year, down from a projected 5.8%. And contractions of 3.4% in Nigeria and 5% in Brazil. These figures may come to be seen as highly optimistic as the year goes by. Foreign investment too is collapsing as investors dump emerging market stocks and bonds, worth $83.3 billion in March alone, dumped and stampede to safer, rich world markets. In the first 90 days of 2020, the cumulative outflow of foreign funds was greater than the whole of 2008, previously the worst on record. The South African rand fell in value by 32% against the dollar over that period, the Mexican peso by 24%, the Brazilian real by 23%, the Indonesian rupee by 14%. And the International Monetary Fund there, supported by 189 member countries around the world, has already now had appeals from 102 of its 189 member countries for financial support and bailouts. The poor will really suffer. One man who is at the epicenter of vaccine development, supporting world health systems, is Bill Gates. His great business strength has given him and his family the resources, the money, the billions to be able to pour into solutions. And just as Herman Van Rompuy said in the opening comments I read to you, this is a period of time now in which we've needed experts, scientists, thinkers, those who know knowledge and facts, who have a sense of history about health, not just those with political opinions. Well, Bill Gates is investing in the vaccine, probably one of the best, most effective ways, working with many countries together to get us to a place where, like we did with mumps from rubella, measles, smallpox, polio, we could come away from pandemics to freedom. A vaccine is a key to freedom. He writes this: our progress won't be in science alone. It'll also be in our ability to make sure everyone benefits from that science. In the years after 2021, after coronavirus, I think we'll learn from the years after 1945. With the end of the Second World War, leaders built international institutions like the UN to prevent more conflicts. After COVID-19, leaders will prepare institutions to prevent the next pandemic. So he's predicting that we will have, besides the World Health Organization, we will have new, and what he calls them, germ games institutions, those that practice what it will mean when another possible pandemic comes along that sweeps us from the corner. Instead of knocking us over sideways, we will be able to stand resolute. I hope, he says, healthy nations, including the poorer ones, will be working together in these preparations, especially by devoting more health, more foreign aid to building up their primary healthcare systems. Even the most self-interested person or even isolationist government should agree with this by now. This pandemic has shown us that viruses don't obey border laws and that we're all connected biologically by a network of microscopic germs, whether we like it or not. If a novel virus appears in a poor country, we want its doctors to have the ability to spot it, contain it, as soon as possible. None of this is inevitable. History doesn't follow a set course. People choose which direction to take, and many make the wrong turn. The years after 2021, says Bill Gates, may resemble the years after 1945. But the best analogy for today may be November the 10th, 1942. Britain had just won its first land victory of the war, and Winston Churchill declared in a speech, "This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is, perhaps, the end of the beginning." One man who will worry himself, maybe sick this year, a political leader, is the President of the United States. He faces a rerun election in November. The indicators were that all was going reasonably well in the first few months of the year. He was predicting growth in the United States of 3%. His big target had been mass jobs and the recovery of American industry. That growth has now collapsed into reverse. The country is in recession. The US economy shrank by 4.8% in the first quarter of 2020. Not growth up, but slowness down. And the jobless are ever on the rise. The latest figures closing in at close to 20 million. Well, President Trump is worried because politicians are making their bid not just on protecting the health of their people or even reviving their economy, but thinking about the implications of what it says for their own prospects. The data, it says, a Sunday Times assessment, is especially disappointing for Donald Trump, the US president, who'd asked voters to judge him by the economy's success under his leadership when they go to the polls in November. He had promised 3% growth. Gregory Dacko, chief US economist at Oxford Economics, said the US economy will suffer an overall hit from the pandemic, which is 3 times the size of the financial crisis 2008-2010, and its worst blow since the Second World War. So politics cannot be just about the rantings of leaders or the self-impression created in the media, but the reality of economy on people's lives. Time magazine reported just this week that before COVID, an 11% of US households, that's roughly 36 million US households, 36 million living with food insecurity. Since the lockdowns in America, demand for food assistance has surged by 207%. This week, The Economist newspaper called the next phase, AC, politics AC, as the 90% economy. In other words, accepting a big swipe off of income and growth somewhere between the 5 to 10%. But it's making the point that for some people, that will represent opportunity. The longer they say the 90% economy endures, the more such inequalities will deepen. People who already enjoy strong professional networks, largely those of middle age and higher, may actually quite enjoy the experience of working from home, notwithstanding the problem of bad internet and irritating children. It may be quite pleasant to chair fewer meetings or performance reviews. Junior folk, even if they make it into an office, will miss out on expertise and guidance of their seniors. Others with poor professional networks, such as the young or recently arrived immigrants, will find it difficult or impossible to strengthen them, hindering upward mobility. In other words, this is the defining big issue, as Gordon Brown said, as Herman Van Rompuy said, as is clearly evidently the case from the Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030, now back projected not to be met in 2030, but possibly 2050 to 2060. Inequality, the injustice of inequality. Presidents, prime ministers may promise mass growth in elections. Last year, 2019, 3 years back, But the reality of this AC is that growth is gone for now, and inequality is here, more in our face than ever before. I read a fascinating review by Alistair Heath, a brilliant political thinker, in the Daily Telegraph newspaper. The 10 most important ways life will be transformed by coronavirus. I just want to read some of it to you. We've known, he said, since Aristotle that human beings are social animals. No plague, no war, no catastrophe, however atrocious, will ever change that. Grandparents can't wait to cuddle their grandchildren. Young people to go out and to party, and the rest of us to travel, go to a restaurant, enjoy life. But the stark reality is that for all our ingrained sociability and pent-up hunger for the experiences we took for granted before COVID, the virus will profoundly change the way we live. The scale of the devastation caused by the coronavirus, as well as the lockdown, is becoming apparent. Civilizations always shift direction following shocks of this magnitude. He calls this coronavirus, this AC period, a marathon run, not a sprinter. It will take years, he says, before we can fully engage its true toll, direct and impact. Years before we know the impact of the financial reality of the pandemic is hugely felt, and this virus will wreck what we've understood as normal. The new normal after COVID, AC, will be, get ready for it, grimmer, more cautious, less optimistic, and a poorer world. It'll be a once more collectivist, with the state on quasi-permanent wartime footing, a paternalistic public health system and mask-wearing culture, and more data sharing, but also more individualistic as people and families strive to increase their sphere of autonomy to protect themselves from the outside world. There will be less division of labour. We will save more. Risk aversion will make a comeback, with hypochondria enshrined in the political psyche. Severe social distancing measures will be imposed wherever there is a major flu epidemic, or even if a new virus emerges. Every company and every family will have to worry that the economy and international travel could be halted at a moment's notice. The consequences will be debilitating, even if better preparedness, enhanced state capacity, and a shake-up of the useless public sector bureaucracies make future lockdowns smoother. Psychologically, we'll realize that we can be struck down by disease just like our medieval ancestors, that there are limits to our progress and to our science. We will suddenly grasp the non-robustness of civilization. Materialism will matter so much more because we're poorer, but also so much less because we're more aware of death and the role of luck. This will impact our values. Will religion, he asks, make a comeback? Will our children have more or less? Will we become harsher or will we become softer? Will we be more tolerant? Will we value freedom more or less? At such moments, many turn to traditional small conservative values. Others go in the opposite way. We are not certain, in other words, of what system we believe in. Borders, he says, will return. Shutting them will no longer merely be a theoretical possibility. For the first time since the Second World War, there will be a constant chance that we'll be told we cannot freely leave our country. Citizenship residence, he writes, and geographical proximity will count for more. There will necessarily be some deglobalization, not least because states will want to produce their own health protective equipment and medicines and machinery. Tragically, it is often the first reflex in every crisis. Irrespective of official policies, some immigrants may have to leave in the short term, especially the low-paid, self-employed, preferring the safety of their own countries rather than the country they live in. Unemployment will be back. It will be a massive blow for younger people who've been used to full employment, who are used to going on internships, used to having apprenticeships, used to believing that there was always a safe route from university. This could fuel a new populism. The environmental movement will suffer. The focus on tangible crises such as the pandemic, antibiotic resistance, or nuclear proliferation, and the costs of living and of jobs. Firms will want to save money, not on all those great changes they wanted to bring about, whether it's inclusion and diversity, whether it's home-based working. They'll be after what is cheapest to maintain the basics. Investors will want higher rewards due to compensating for a bigger chance of a bankruptcy or a debt write-off. The super efficient businesses models of the BC era are over. Thousands of shops, restaurants, taxis, airlines will only survive if they're always packed and just in time. The economic carnage will be eye-watering. The prices of many goods and services will consistently rise, and what we once called normal will become a luxury. The trend since the early 1900s has been for urban living, but for many who can, it will be to flee from cities, to get more space, to be in their own safe paradigms. If many more can work largely from home, they will be encouraged to do so. Property values will likely shift. In London, flats will decline. The rest of the country, houses will rise. Offices and retail property will slide. Politicians will be forced to build the infrastructures that allow the enablers of the economy to get out. These last few years before coronavirus were a golden age. Foolishly, we never realized how good we had it. So the question we must ask is, therefore, what kind of politics is necessary to see us through the AC era, the after coronavirus era? What kind of political leader will nations need to have that solidity and certainty of delivery, of mindset, of authority that the public can trust, that we will trust? Now, this is not out of any political allegiance or political positioning. It is just a fascinating piece I came across literally in the last 2 days. The Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher, and the Coronavirus Age, an article written by Peggy Noonan, a well-known US weekly columnist on the Wall Street Journal, and also appearing on television on NBC and ABC in the US. Well-known, well-respected, well-researched. The Iron Lady and the Coronavirus Age. She says this: what is essential now from our political class? The question, what is essential? I find inspiration in a monumental work, the journalist Charles Moore's 3-volume biography of Margaret Thatcher. It's a masterpiece of fairness and insight. It's also something new, she says, a work of justice done to a woman in modern politics. At its heart is not a story about political survival, but about seriousness, about the purpose of politics, which is to guide a nation safely through the world while creating the conditions and arrangements by which your people can flourish. It's about winning the argument about how to achieve safety and flourishing. In his stirring epilogue, Charles Moore sums up Thatcher's career, legacy, and essential nature. She can't be understood, he writes, based only on her public statements. She must be seen also in light of her character. Its contradictions were striking. She was high-minded and highly educated, yet had a common touch. She was fierce but kind, rude and courteous, calculating yet principled, matter-of-fact yet romantic, frank yet secretive, astute yet innocent, rational yet capricious, puritanical yet flirtatious. She combined an immense assurance about following her own way with a permanent uneasiness in life. A friend is quoted saying she'd not been allowed the time to be happy in childhood. Charles Moore says she sought the laurels of fame and power but could never rest on them. She applied her high standards to herself, and for all her pride in her own achievements, she found herself wanting. Her only solution was to press ever onwards. I suppose in summary, it's saying that the qualities of a leader are to be purposeful, to have a focus on the outcome good of the nation, not on the party, to be interested in the people's best rather than the political ideology, to give up on individualism, to abandon this protectionist instinct of the now, to be interested in how to steer a nation through health and freedom, how to help people be without fear, yet sound and sensible. It needs that authoritative pragmatism and purposefulness. Let me wrap with a poem. Found this written in 1869. It was reprinted during the, what we've called the Spanish flu that I referred to earlier, the 1919 pandemic. This is timeless, it says. And people stayed at home. Now remember, this is 1919. And people stayed at home. And they read books. And they listened. And they rested. And they did exercise. And they made art. And they played. And they learned new ways of being. They stopped. And they listened more deeply. Someone meditated. Someone prayed. Someone met their shadow. And people began to think differently, and people healed. And in the absence of people who lived in ignorant ways, dangerous, meaningless, and heartless, the earth also began to heal. When the danger ended and people found themselves, they grieved for the dead, and they made new choices and dreamed of new visions and created new ways of living, and completely healed the earth, just as they were healed. I hope these reflections have been helpful.
Find out how you can succeed at work after you survive the pandemic. Join us for the Marketplace Shift, Work Shift online conference. The ongoing global pandemic has brought the world as we know it to a standstill. Economies are ailing, governments are teetering, health services are stretched, and individuals are living in anxiety. Believe it or not, this too shall pass. But as we heard a senior UK government official say, it was easier to turn off the tap of the UK workplace than it will be to put it back on. To put perspective on this season, we need to apply the words in 1 Chronicles 12:32, which says, "The men of Issachar had an understanding of the times and knew what Israel ought to do." The question is, what will our work-life reality be post this global pandemic? Will jobs exist the way they were packaged pre-COVID-19? Will work patterns remain the same? Will lifestyle balance be affected? Will some of us really have the jobs to go back to? Will some industries that employ millions still be viable post the pandemic? With this in mind, we need to put on our spiritual and strategic thinking caps so that we are not caught off guard and that life does not just pass us by. WorkShift brings you commentary, advice and know-how from industry and field experts that will give you better perspective and a distinctive advantage in the marketplace as we approach the new norm. Keynote speakers are Lord Michael Hastings, Leke Alder, Tonye Cole, Balaji Balogun, and our host Dr. Shola Fola Alade. Other field experts will cover the following sectors: oil and gas, finance and banking, telecoms, industry, media, energy and technology. Don't miss WorkShift from Tuesday the 5th to Thursday the 7th of May 2020, exclusively on the Liberty Church London's YouTube channel.